And good morning to everyone.
This meeting is being recorded.
As you know, this meeting is being recorded, and I hope all the attendees as well as the panelists are comfortable with that. In case you're not, we request you to keep your camera off and yourself on mute. Anyway, all the attendees are on mute. We, on behalf of EU delegation of India, EU Resource Efficiency Initiative, seconded European Standardization Expert in India project, CENELAC, Bureau of Indian Standards, along with Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, and NITI Aayog. I welcome you all to this webinar, where we will talk about the role of standards in policy and resource efficiency and circular economy transition in India and the EU. Uh, as you all know, that circular economy and resource efficiency as an agenda, as an idea and a concept is gaining traction around the world because these two concepts not only contribute to what they seek to do primarily, but will also help us achieve and help the transition toward low carbon pathway and sustainable development, because they in themselves try to look at a life cycle of the entire product and material. And in this webinar, what we want to do today is to talk about the learnings, experiences, lessons that we have had in India and the EU on the development of policy on circular economy and resource efficiency, and specifically look at the role of market instruments like standards, labeling, indexes, and what role they can play in the years to come, and what are the current developments, where have we been moving, what have been the discussions, are there any challenges, because everything that is around us is obviously based on the linear approach. So moving towards a circular approach is not going to be so easy, but we have a very distinguished panel today. We have and the number of registrations also clearly go on to show that there is immense interest in this topic. And without taking more time, I want to hand over to Dr. Michael Bucki, who is the head of section and counselor at the European delegation of India, and also looks at the topic of circular economy and resource efficiency. He will be the moderator for the first panel. However, I missed out on one thing. We have some house rules, and I want to flag them out to everybody present. All attendees today, all participants are on default mute. You will not be able to raise hand if you have a question. We are sorry for that. The chat window is also disabled, but we have the Q&A window available for everybody. So in case you have a question during the presentation by a panelist, we request you to pose your question. And if you want to address it to a specific panelist, we request you to mention the name. All the panelists will be able to look at the question and to be able to respond to that question. So this can go on throughout the webinar, and you won't have to also sort of only wait till the end, although we encourage you to wait till the end of the completion of a panel, because you might have a question that might get addressed by the next panelist or the panelists to come. For the panelists, we request you to turn off your webcam and be on mute if you're not speaking or making presentation. All the panelists have the option of chat available so that they can reach out to the organizers in case they face any technical problems or have any questions. Like I said, you can answer questions by opening the Q&A panel and by using the button "I want to answer live." Answers can be given by different persons at the same time. So if any expert on the panel today in the entire course of the webinar have answers to a questions posed, then you are welcome to answer to the question. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording and presentation slides will be shared post webinar. Questions and written answers will be part of the report, and these will also be shared post webinar with all the panelists as well as all the attendees. Over to you, Michael.
Yes, good afternoon, Reva. Good afternoon to all. A warm welcome on behalf of the EU delegation to India. And since it's still January, my best wishes for 2022. It's a real pleasure to be with you and an honor to facilitate this first panel. From our end, I just want to recall quickly that we acknowledge and we commend India for its vision to make circular economy a central pillar of sustainable development, and the SDG 12 in particular by 2030, and in the longer run to contribute to carbon neutrality and living in harmony with nature by 2050. We are side by side. We have been for quite a long time, thanks to the EU Resource Efficiency Initiative, together with GIZ. And I'm very happy to complement this support we have been providing for 5 years already with this very interesting workshop today with Sensenelec and the BIS. We have had in 2020 a joint declaration on resource efficiency and circular economy between the EU and India. It has now been elevated to a formal partnership under the strategic bilateral partnership. And we are hoping that this conversation today will enable to look a little deeper in the substance on how the Indian economy and the Indian regulatory framework will absorb those standards, develop or adopt those standards in order to enable industry, business, consumers, government, in particular the officials which are drafting terms of reference and then implementing public procurements, how they will make sense of all this complexity, because it's a very important global goal. It's also a technical challenge, and that is fully acknowledged. So I'm very happy to welcome our fellow panelists, and starting with Dr. Satyendra Kumar. Are you here, Doctor? Doctor, can you hear me? Yes, I see you. Good afternoon. Pleasure to see you.
Good afternoon.
Doctor, we have met just a few weeks ago. It was my pleasure to discuss with you how we could work together towards UNIA and discussions on plastics and resource efficiencies more broadly. It's a pleasure to see you again. I'd like to start with a question to you from a policy perspective, if I may. As a director in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, from a policy perspective, and also in a post-COVID world, where do you see the most urgent needs in improving criteria that REC standards must fulfill in Indian context towards product longevity, eco-design, or recyclability? You have the floor, Doctor. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Buki, and very good afternoon to all the distinguished panelists, as well as all the participants of today's webinar. So, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the entire team behind this EU REI initiative to keep working on such a relevant and urgent issue of our times. We all know that in order to ensure the sustainability of our Mother Earth, our planet Earth, resource efficiency and circular economy are going to be the key drivers. We know that whatever resources we are having, particularly the natural resources, they need to be judicially used and in a sustainable manner, so that there is a sustainable development and we have a sustainable planet Earth. And the reason is well known that we do not have infinite resources with us. Whatever resources we talk about, whether biotic or abiotic, all the resources are not infinite. We cannot go and consuming all those resources without having thought about how to replenish all those things so that the future generations also live on all those resources for eternity. Just I would like first to highlight all those things which we all know, but I'll get into that in order to set the discussion in motion for all of us, is that we all know, as already has been highlighted, that in order to preserve and conserve the natural resources and for sustainable natural resource management, the resource efficiency and circular economy hold the key. It not only help in reducing the reliance on the virgin natural resources, but on the other hand, it has a role in reducing the cost of the products in many cases. So it has got a business sense also integrated with it. And when we talk about the prolonged life cycle, when we talk about the resource efficiency, invariably it's interlinked with the prolonged life cycle. And when we talk about the circular economy, it is invariably integrated with the use of the secondary raw material. And both these approaches help in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions and thereby address the issue of tackling the foremost problem of our current generation, the climate change, in an effective manner, in a reasonable and logical manner. Having said that, I would also like to say that understanding its importance in the present times, our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, in his address to the nation on the occasion of 75th Independence Day on 15th of August 2021, highlighted India's action on Mission Circular Economy. When we talk about the resource efficiency and circular economy, there is a policy dimension attached to it. And before I come and talk about the measures taken, particularly in India, towards facilitating this resource efficiency and circular economy, I'd like to bring to the knowledge of all the participants that NITI Aayog, a think tank of the Government of India, constituted about, in fact, 11 committees on circular economy with regard to 11 waste streams. To facilitate, these waste streams are municipal solid waste, scrap metal, electronic waste, and light waste. The idea behind constitution of these committees is to work out the action plans. And these action plans detail out the roles and responsibilities envisaged and to be executed by different stakeholders, including the roles to be delivered by the government agencies, the governments, with regard to framing of policies, if there are any policy gaps, from the industry for the adoption of circularity in their business by way of making relevant changes, by way of adopting the principle of sustainable production. And it's a wide array of things that go into this resource efficiency and circular economy, as we all know. Having said that, just like to highlight one more thing also. When we talk about resource efficiency and circular economy, it is based on primarily 6 principles which we all know, which is reduce, reuse, recycle, recover, redesign, and remanufacture. And when we think about any of the waste streams or any of the product streams, so it helps us move towards the resource efficiency and circular economy in a very logical and comprehensive manner. Now, coming to the aspects where it has started coming in the policies of the government here in India in a big way, I'd like to highlight the draft extended producer responsibility on plastic packaging waste, which talks about minimum recyclability of the plastic packaging waste. This talks about minimum reuse with regard to rigid plastic packaging waste. and minimum use of recycled content of coming from the plastic recycling by the manufacturers of the plastic packaging. So this ecosystem is what is the need of the hour with regard to all the products, whether it be electronic waste or the electronic products, whether it be any of those like batteries and all those. And it is here where I see that synergies, or where I see the collaboration between India and EU may happen, to understand that in what ways each of our countries here in India or in the European Union are moving towards setting their targets, whether it be recyclability in any sector, whether it be reuse or use of the recycled content in any sector. So here there's a kind of a dialogue that I see may happen and should happen between EU member countries and India to understand and take forward based on the respective technological advancements of each of these countries for the adoption of the circularity policies, to what extent and in what manner, how it has to be paced, and where we can just engage further to enhance this thing. And the challenge with today's webinar is particularly focused on the role of the standards. And here again, we have our national bodies for standardization. EU nations have their own national bodies for standardization. And already we have these national bodies working towards the quality and safety of the products through standardization. So what is the need? Wherein the talk of the standardization comes in vis-a-vis RE and CE, the resource efficiency and circular economy. And that is an area where, again, EU member states and India may come together to understand the challenges that are there with the secondary raw materials, vis-a-vis the primary raw materials. And these challenges are of the nature of the performance of the secondary raw materials, their availability, their cost. And here the partnership or a dialogue may help understand the respective best practices and the respective measures taken for a standardization of the secondary raw materials wherever it has been achieved in any of the countries, whether it be India or any of the EU member states, and see that what has led to and how to learn from each other, basing on the local circumstances of each of these countries. So we have to always keep in mind that thing. So when we talk about the secondary raw material and its standardization, so this standardization is going to facilitate the adoption of that secondary raw material by way of creating enough demand by the sector, because it has got now standards. And here I see, to my understanding, there are several sectors still in India where we need to develop the standards for the secondary raw material to be used by the production sector in the production of the products. As I have already mentioned, that already through policies to promote recycling, the availability of such raw materials, such secondary raw materials, is going to increase in the coming times. The need is how to go for its standardization so that its use by the producers of the products gets more acceptable, and it gets more acceptable to the consumers also to adopt all those products, or to accept all those products based on secondary raw materials.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm sorry to be a tough timekeeper, but if you don't mind, may I please?
I'm done, Mr. Buki. I just was just highlighting. Thank you very much, and I think that today's webinar would facilitate in gelling the EU member states and India towards developing standards that help facilitate circular economy and resource efficiency. I wish all the best to all the participants and panelists of this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. I think it was an excellent overview of the goals that we share. You've mentioned how to include new goals and concerns in the process that was already ongoing for national bodies to issue standards on safety and quality, and now to integrate new issues like the environmental footprint, the longevity, and the increase or the enabling of the reuse of secondary raw materials. I think that was an excellent start. And now I'd like to turn towards Mr. Roy Chaudhuri. A very warm welcome, Mr. Chaudhuri. You are a civil engineer. You are the DDG for standardization at the Bureau of Indian Standards. And you are in particular leading on national standardization work in various technologies and sectors, working with stakeholders, engaging them, and coordinating with partner organizations. So my question to you, mindful of the time that we have left, which is a little less than 10 minutes, and we have two more excellent speakers coming after you. So I would also very much appreciate if we could try and keep to the time. My question to you is, those new greener standards have been developed across the world, in EU, in Japan and other places, and how to make sure that India doesn't reinvent the green wheel, or can we make sure that the development in India contributes to a convergence of global standards with like-minded countries? Mr. Chaudhuri, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bukhi. Very good afternoon and very good morning to all the participants, wherever you are, whether in India or in Europe. At the outset, again, it's my pleasure to be here in this very important seminar on the subject of role of standards and policies in resource efficiency and circular economy transition in India and the EU. Mr. Satyendra Kumar had highlighted some of the key issues which govern circular economy and resource efficiency towards our overall objective of achieving sustainable development. And for India, in particular, as we again, Mr. Satyendra Kumar had mentioned of India celebrating its 75th year of independence, and how while we are reflecting on what has happened earlier and our achievements, we are also looking forward to what India aspires to be. And what India aspires to is to be a country which is self-reliant or Atmanirbhar. And I think the key to self-reliant India is obviously going to be sustainable growth and development that leads to optimum utilization of the resources, where our production processes are designed around the concepts of circular economy and reduced resource dependency, while we are achieving the competitiveness which would enable us to move forward as an economy. In all these, I think standards obviously play a very key role in pursuing some of the policies and some of the programs which the government outlines towards the objectives of sustainable development. And therefore, standards play a key role in providing the impetus to those and to the adoption of the technologies and the practices whereby it builds confidence amongst the stakeholders, including the consumers. And therefore, we have standards that would be facilitating recycling and waste utilization on one hand, and of course, waste management on the other hand. And all these could cover standards for recycled materials, standards which would deal with recyclability and repairability of products, standards that would secure information on the material composition of the products, and standards that would enable phasing out of hazardous substances from products. And therefore, as a national standards bodies, we are alive to these situations, these needs, and and these have been addressed over the years through various means, and particularly with respect to the use of secondary materials. We have a large many of standards that facilitate the utilization of secondary materials. It could be in terms of maybe the material characteristics, or to the extent the materials could be used as secondary materials, in production of primary goods and articles. So we have standards that deal with the utilization of industrial wastes, like say for instance fly ash or steel slag or chemical gypsum on one hand, and the use of other terms of waste, say for instance in construction and demolition waste, or to the very serious issue of plastics and recycling of plastics, dealing with biodegradable plastics or your compostable plastics, and many others, recycling of batteries, e-waste in particular, and all these sort of complement what is being tried to be achieved through the various government policies and programs. So while on one hand we have the national standards in place, there are other issues which would be more horizontal issues for that matter, spanning across different sectors, different technologies, and there I think it would be very worthwhile to look into what is happening elsewhere in the world, and definitely we don't want to sort of duplicate or reinvent the wheels in those areas. We have been very actively engaged in the international work, both at ISO and IC in the relevant committees, and particularly in TC 207 or in TC 323, which are on environmental management and circular economy specifically. And we have, in fact, adopted a large many of these standards which deal with greenhouse gases, quantification of gases, your life cycle analysis, and of course, the standards on the various frameworks and the principles governing circular economy. So we are definitely, as a standards body, as a national standards body, we would definitely not be reinventing those. But on the other hand, we would be sort of trying to get actively engaged in the process of standards development, particularly at the international level, and of course, in sharing experiences and information amongst other bodies, national bodies as well as regional bodies, like what we are trying to achieve through this webinar in our engagement with Sense-Elect. So definitely that would be our principal approach when we would be dealing with standardization in the areas of circular economy and resource efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhuri. It was very encouraging, and indeed we are trying to facilitate this dialogue today with the participation of Sense-Elect and the BIS. So very grateful for your participation. Now I'd like to turn to Mr. Sudhir Kumar of NITI Aayog.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Buki.
I kept the most difficult question for you, I think. Because we've seen that on one hand, there is this very high-level vision of His Excellency Prime Minister Modi. On the other hand, you have to deal with a very large number of committees, and each of those sectoral or like thematic committees, they have to deal with a very broad range of stakeholders, going from the primary and secondary sectors down to end users, civil society, financiers, technical experts, academia, and so on and so on. So you need to, on one end, maintain this very open, transparent, participative dialogue with so many people, and at the same time, you need to integrate new complexities of resource and energy efficiency, those 6R that Director Kumar mentioned. So how do you reconcile those two challenges? You have the floor. Welcome again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, all the esteemed panelists and participants here. And I think this is a very, very informative kind of discussions held. In previous years also, I saw a very rich material that has got developed through the engagement with the EU REI and the Sense-Elect in different areas, particularly in the electric side with the CII that has been happening. So, just to give an overview, the kind of, how we really want to see this circular economy initiative in the wider perspective. So this is something like, most of the things have to happen around the businesses, new businesses models and regulations. And within the government setup also, this is not something we want to do in a very centralized fashion. So all these committees, that are referred by my colleague was set up within the ministries, and it was a kind of left to the ministries to involve as many as possible stakeholders for the widest possible consultation, involving all the businesses, startups, academia, and essentially in all the committees, BIS was also member for that. So it was we thought it that if it's a group led by a very senior level and all the stakeholders are there, then we can perhaps locate all the possible pain points as well as the requirements for the sector to grow. And another is that we wanted not only to address the waste and waste stream side, we wanted to have the discussion, say, transit to the circular economy side also, because many times we just land up around the problems that are very visible, but we want to go to, how we can really make best use of the kind of developments and the principles that are little established around circular economy. So that was the broad structuring of all these initiatives within the government involving the businesses and the academia and the environment side. So that has been the broad area. Coming to the standard side, say there are a lot of learnings from all these groups that we have set up, and essentially in all the groups, the secondary material standards that has come very strongly. And BIS is already aware and they are taking up a lot of initiatives around whatever has been highlighted in different areas like municipal solid waste, scrap metal. We took up lithium ion batteries that the issues will be arising in times to come. Tire and used rubber, ministry has come up a very articulated kind of EPR framework for that. So those groups have not only attempted the regulatory as well as, but they have attempted the developmental aspects also, how the things can be seen a little holistically, so that there are no, in the entire chain, there are not major gaps. So that has been the broad strategy. Coming to the standards, like, the nation, we have a national strategy for the standardization also that was released sometime 2018. And that integrates the entire landscape for the standards. So it's essentially on the 4+ what we call the standards development and conformity assessments, accreditation, and methodology. There are certain regulations also that are mandated by the regulations, and where the regulations as well as the standards, they come very close. Another is that awareness, training and education. So this standardization and how to really place the entire system, how to see all these things in a system context. That is, I think, very essential and very important for the circular economy aspects. Say, for example, like in plastics, like now we are mandating kind of certain percentages of the secondary material with the virgin material and all that. And if we look at how the European, say, framework have addressed it, it's something related to methodology for traceability of the recycling content. So this similar framework, we have to get into some kind of systems, accreditation systems that can assure about the traceability of these systems. So it's not only the standard setting, how we really have the systems that can ensure that the trade happens and there is a sufficient confidence about the kind of declarations that come by the recyclers about their material, and they get really the kind of risk that are involved in any kind of use of secondary material, that is also addressed through these systems. So there are multiple issues around that. So if we have some of these systems, say in many sectors, recycling or secondary material uses is happening, but many times it leads to the downcycling. If we have right ecosystem, perhaps we can move to the upcycling in many of these secondary areas. So that is another point, really, if we have the right ecosystem for the standards, conformity assessment, and traceability, then perhaps we can fast move towards the upcycling and better, feeding back the secondary material with the primary materials. So these are some of the kind of issues that we'll be looking more closely in times to come this year and all that. And the support that we seek, it's not only the standard setting, the secondary materials, many secondary materials in sufficient quantities would be arising in different value chains. So there are a lot of issues related to characterization, how to really have confidence about the kind of consistency, characterization of these secondary material streams, and what will be the characterization for the kind of mix of material at different say levels and all that. So a lot of steps are required, many, there's a lot of work for that, I would say. And definitely we would be benefiting from the experience you have. I just found that you also have set up many committees for the circular economy, say for plastics. You have TC 249 that deals with the many range of issues and the range of materials in the plastic side, other sides also. So definitely these all interactions will be very beneficial to take forward this sector little at faster pace and all that. That's very much required to, for the broader sustainability aspects and to have consistency in, all these areas. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Advisor Sudhir Kumar, and thanks to NITI Aayogi for undertaking that tremendous task, an exciting one. Thank you also for drawing our attention to the upstream parts of the supply chain, as well as the importance of compliance and conformity assessment, metrology, training, and awareness. Now, I would like to request the kind understanding of the organizers, because I did a poor job as a timekeeper. We are 8 minutes late, but I would still like to request 5 minutes for Mr. Ashok Ganesh, who's the Director for Market Perspective and Innovation at Sensenelec. Welcome, and I'd like to ask you to tell us about the work that you are doing, or you have been doing, with regards to integrating circularity in standards related to material use, and in particular, how you manage to foster those partnerships and dialogue with business organization and like-minded actors. I will, at a later stage, would be very happy to entertain longer discussion with Mr. Sudhir Kumar and all of our fellow panelists both from an environmental perspective, from a business-to-business perspective. But for now, I'd like to give the floor to Ashok Ganesh, please.
Good morning. Thanks, Michael. I'll try and be quick. And welcome to everybody. And good morning, good afternoon. And just to say how pleased I am to be able to participate in this really interesting and important event. I want to make 3 broad points, if I can, and hopefully I'll respond to Michael's question in the 3rd point. Just to be clear, I represent here today SEN and Senelec. SEN and Senelec are 2 of the 3 recognized European standards organizations in Europe, I think European. And we are associations of national standards bodies. And I know many of our members have a very good link with and collaboration with the Bureau of Indian Standards. We, at the regional level, Senelec, we're also recently signed a cooperation agreement with the Bureau of Indian Standards. And we I really see this event as one of the key steps towards strengthening that relationship, because we've got so much in common and so many things that we can achieve together. We've already heard from the great panelists before, the recognition, the investment in standardization, national level and international level through ISO and IEC, and those are really important because all of our CEN members are all members of ISO, all of our CENLEC members are all members of IEC. So we're all part of the same world, the same community. Then I come on to my second point, which is about we're really lucky, but we have a challenge in that standardization is such a powerful tool. The challenge is that not enough of the relevant stakeholders, partners, people outside of the standardization world, not enough understand the value of standardization, how to make it work for them. So we have a common challenge in order to make sure that we can spread the word. We don't have much resource. I think we've already heard that from one of the previous speakers, but therefore that means it's even more important that we partner together. We use the scarce resources we have to make sure that those who can benefit from standards do. Now, the second part of that point is that standards are uniquely placed to do, in the context of circular economy and materials efficiency, certainly to address three aspects. One is the policy drivers. Standardization can respond to the policy, the direction of travel that policy is going in, regional policy, national policy, governmental policy. So standards are very good tools for doing that. Primarily, standards are tools for industrial efficiency, specifying the performance requirements of technologies, how to measure efficiency, effectiveness, so measurement characteristics, and also things like even defining terminology and common languages to deploy in the same way, in a repeatable way, ways of doing things, whether that's application of technology or a commonly agreed way of doing things. So standards in this context can meet the policy needs, help industry to develop efficient processes, to develop the products and services and systems that citizens want in this world. We want sustainability. We want to live in a clean and efficient world that respects the fact that we are living with finite resources. So that's the tool of standardization, that we understand it. We know the values. We know how important it is and how valuable it is. But we have a challenge, common challenge, to spread the word. The third point, which I hopefully come back to Michael's and responds to Michael's question, is about how can we actually use that standardization tool? How can we reach out to those, especially industry stakeholders? Well, I think there are the very fact of standards organizations, who we are, both in India and in Europe, and throughout the 34 countries who are part of the CEN and CENLEC system. We have our networks. We are a platform. Me as a standardizer, I don't write any standards, but I help to offer a platform, a system where those who need the standards, policymakers, industry predominantly, but also consumers, environmentalists, and all the other stakeholders, they can come and make the standards that they want to achieve their goals. So we use our channels to do that. We've got existing channels. We need to use them more efficiently. We need to develop them further. We need to be attractive. We need to use the right terminology and engage. And that's easier said than done in some cases. We need to follow the direction of travel. In Europe, we see the European Union has basically two broad priorities towards the so-called the green, the translation of the economy to becoming more green, and also embracing digital technologies. Those are the two key driving directions of travel of the European Union. We as standards bodies, although we are independent, CEN and CENLEC, we've incorporated those two key drivers into all of our policy, our strategy. You can see behind me the slide. We have a strategy 2030 that we adopted last year. And those two twin transitions, as they're called, green and digital, are embedded strongly in that. So we're already riding the wave of the policy driving in Europe. That's one aspect. part of my role in Sen and Senelec is to help standardization to deal with addressing new knowledge coming from research and innovation, especially in areas like resource efficiency. There are new techniques, new knowledge, new technologies, new ways of working, new applications, but they need to be standardized to help them to be used. And that addressing, engaging with researchers and innovators and helping them to access our standards development system, it's a tough one. We've been at it for years. We started as a very slow burn, but we're getting there. And if we, again, I'm sure there, on the Indian side, I'm sure there are experiences that we can share. And certainly from the European side, we've been more than happy to share, because I'm sure that we can learn from each other. There's the last one, which I sort of throw out there. Standards, yeah, they exist in Europe, they exist as pieces of paper. They exist as PDF files, but that's rather old-fashioned, both of those, certainly the paper. We're moving towards an era of standards as machine-readable applications, standards as software. My boss, our Director General in Senelec, only said last week, the future is that standards bodies will become software houses. And okay, I don't think it's going to happen next week, but it won't be that far. I think she's right. And if we look at that, we see this: users of standards want to use the content of standards to deploy them in systems and processes which meet their needs, not refer to bits of paper all the time. I know in India there's a huge capacity and expertise related to software deployment, development and application. And I think there is something very much in common that we have, that we can work together on to embrace and define the next generation of standards, which will take us into the future. Sorry, taking too long, but I thought that was worth throwing out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ganesh. It was very valuable. You have a long-term vision, and as you say, you've been riding this wave for a long time, longer than most of us. I must say the wave is clearly starting here in India, and one point in particular that gives us reasons for hope is this recent instruction on public procurements in India that mandates to consider a quality-based approach to public procurements, which mechanically will trigger questions both in the mind of the people who are drafting the tenders and the tender call and the people who are applying. Because both on supply and demand, there will be a need for capacity building. And once you have the good question, then the importance of the good answers, such as standards, becomes much more obvious. And so I think that this space, and maybe the automatization in that space, as you were mentioning in the end, the fact that we can streamline the process of assessment, whether the technology or a business is suitable and compatible with green and digitalization transition. I think that will come into the fore in India. Maybe not next week, as you said, but certainly in the coming years. So thank you very much. Once again, I'm sorry I took 50 minutes when I was supposed to take 30, but I think it was very valuable. I'm sorry for the other speakers and the other moderators. My sincere apologies. But thanks again, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you to all the panelists. May I request panelists and Michael to please switch on your cameras. We want to take a virtual picture after this very interesting panel and all the thoughts that we have heard on standards. Yeah, so I think, Priya, why don't you go ahead and click a virtual picture? Thank you, everyone. We have, I think it's a very good start. This is a very promising start. We know that there is a lot of interest, there is a lot of action, there is a lot of thought going behind what circular economy standards will look like, what they need to consider, and how they need to also help the transition. Now, without taking much further time, I want to hand over to the next session moderator, which is Dr. Rachna Arora. She is the team leader for the EU Resource Efficiency Initiative, and she has the unenviable task of moderating a panel with 7 extremely good experts talking on a variety of issues. So I will hand over to Rachna.
Thanks, Reva, and thanks, Michael, and the session 1 speakers. I think this was really flowing into the right direction as we were just expecting. So yeah, I think we have 7 speakers and a lot of information coming across considerably, because I think the context or the tone has already been set by the first set of discussions which we have, and largely looking at, I think, the need for standards is very clear. We have heard BIS, we have heard Sense and ELAC, and yeah, the modality. So what we are going to focus now in this session is largely on how do we move forward, what are the kind of policy perspectives and like elements. So if you have to open up the entire Pandora of circular economy, all across the value chain, any sector, any element that you pick on, standards emerge to be the biggest kind of the policy or the market instruments that's going to actually bring forward a lot of change. So if we take an example, secondary raw material utilization, that's across mentioned by Mr. Satyendra Kumar from the ministry. And I think it's coming across in most of the policies that's coming on plastics or tires. We had another EPR draft notification released by the Indian ministry very soon. And I think all of this would require innovative business models, would require the industry, would require a lot of kind of elements, which is where I think the role for BIS, the role for coordination or exchange between different sets of stakeholders that we have today would actually bring out these perspectives very clearly. So in this session that we have now, we have industry, we have 3 ministry representatives, and of course the EU European Commission here. So I would just like to begin with inviting Dr. Bhavna from the Ministry of Environment. If you could just share some of your experiences on how do you think the policy sets the context, and where is it that the entire move, which we've heard NITI Aayog, we've heard ministry, but how do you think the policy is framing in the direction where it's more forthcoming towards building up the role for standards which are more universal and, yeah, of course, support the entire circularity perspective? Over to you, Dr. Bhavna.
Thank you, Dr. Rachna. Good afternoon and good morning to all the fellow panelists and everyone. We know that the use of natural resources and materials form the backbone of global economies and in turn of human development and well-being. And driven by rapid economic growth and population increase, the demand for natural resources and materials have grown manifold over the last few decades. For India, and India is one of the most dynamic economies in the world. In order to provide for its increasing population, rapid urbanization, and growing aspirations, while simultaneously avoiding resource constraints, India needs to take a path of sustainable and efficient resource use. Clearly, we know that the resource efficiency and circular economy presents the opportunity to address any resource constraints and environmental concerns simultaneously, while also driving transformative benefits for businesses and consumers. Honorable Prime Minister, in his address on the 75th Independence Day, has highlighted India's action on Mission Circular Economy. Government of India has taken series of actions in this area, and to assess resource-related issues faced by the country and advise the government on the comprehensive strategy for mainstreaming resource efficiency, Ministry of Environment constituted Indian Resource Panel in 2015, which has since been reconstituted into a steering committee to guide the resource efficiency cell in the ministry in 2018. We also have heard from the esteemed panelists about the circular economy committees constituted by NITI Aayog to develop circular economy action plans for 11 categories of waste. And 5 of these action plans have already been finalized, and these action plans all touches upon the regulatory aspects and developing standards for the products and secondary materials as well. The ministry is formulating national policy for mainstreaming resource efficiency in circular economy, and it provides for an overarching framework so that the efficient use of resources and upcycling of waste across all the economic sectors is enabled. The draft policy draws upon life cycle thinking and seeks to create a facilitative and a collaborative setup to mainstream these concepts by fostering cross-sectoral collaborations for development of sectoral strategies and policy instruments, which also includes very clearly standards, development of standards. So standards and certifications play a significant role in promoting resource efficiency and circular economy by supporting decision-making at both ends, that is both for producers and consumers. Standards make it easier to compare products and identify one with better environmental performance and credentials. Standards create confidence for consumers to buy a product made from recycled or secondary materials with matching qualities or properties as with products from primary resources. At the end of producers, standards help to improve environmental performance of their products and services, track sustainability related aspects across the whole value chain, and accordingly source raw materials for their products, and also then leverage the same for branding and marketing of their products. For consumers, these standards guide their purchasing decisions by providing information about performance, environmental impact, embedded resource use, etc. of their product. Aspects such as product lifetime, material content, raw material sourcing, use of recycled materials, durability, product efficiency, recyclability at the end of life, etc. are key components for resource efficiency and circular economy related standards. A robust standard and certification mechanism is crucial to enable environmental accreditation across the value chain of the products and services. In many countries, voluntary eco-labels or certification are used to help differentiate environmental friendly products from the alternatives available. And in India, Bureau of Indian Standards has developed standards, for example, for certain construction-related recycled products. There is a star labeling for appliances by Bureau of Energy Efficiency that identifies graded categories as on their energy consumption. And the EcoMark scheme provides certification of select consumer products that meet certain environmental specifications, considering cradle-to-grave approach. The draft national policy has acknowledged the vital role of standards for promoting resource efficiency in circular economy and has identified task of development of these standards, for example, for standards for secondary raw materials, products with recycled content, certification scheme from consumer products, etc. in its action plan. These tasks will be led by Bureau of Indian Standards in collaboration with this ministry and all concerned stakeholders. And through these standards, this Bureau will have a key role in promoting sustainable production and consumption. So standards and certification supported with policy instruments like sustainable public procurement and public awareness in due course will make the economy more resource efficient and environmentally sustainable. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Bhavna. And yeah, I think you already provided quite insights on how the draft resource efficiency policy paves way for setting the discussion. I'm sorry, I'm just not able to start my video, so maybe if the host could actually help me do it. But yeah, otherwise I can just continue. Yeah, so I think there are quite a lot of elements that you mentioned, design for recyclability, and of course, looking at the entire raw material utilization, eco-design, that's the framework that the draft policy already hints towards. Moving forward from the Indian side, I would like to invite the next speaker, Ms. Paula, from the European Commission. She's the deputy head of the unit representing the DG Environment and largely working on the issues related to SCP, Sustainable Consumption and Product Policy.
Thank you. Yes, good morning. Good morning from Europe. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here, and I thank the organizers for giving this opportunity to present also the European perspective on the policies for circular economy and resource efficiencies, and really see what how the dynamics of standards actually is supportive of these policies. Allow me in this few minutes of my interventions to go through the main policy documents that are the basis for our work currently for circular economy, and at the same time I'll give you just a few very brief reminder of the type of standards that we develop, knowing that there are many experts around the table that know more about it than myself, but still I think it's useful to understand how we see the dynamic of standards in Europe. And then I will just give you a few examples of the areas where we are working on standards for circular economy. So you have heard the main policy document, the roadmap for European policies and the environment is now, since a couple of years, the European Green Deal. So the European Green Deal is really the communication that puts Europe on the pathway to sustainable development. This is an integral part of the European strategy to implement the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. We have, with the European Green Deal, set out a series of priorities, so that would bring the green and digital transitions, but in different areas. So we have recognized that we need to work on pollutions, and we have developed some documents and then some policies for that, the Zero Pollution Action Plan and others. We need to do more efforts on biodiversity with a biodiversity strategy, and also concerning circular economy. We have continued the policies of the past for circular economy, and then trying to make industry cleaner and more circular with another document, another action plan, the Circular Economy Action Plan #2, that we refer to it. And this Circular Economy Action Plan is really taking the work that has been done in the past 5 years and bringing it to the next level. So really mainstreaming circularity in other areas. What is interesting to see is while we're maintaining sustainability in all the EU policies with the Green Deal, we need to see also what is the relevance for standards. For example, we are going to try to make all the use of standards consistent across the policies, and then push the use of standards really as a main factor for sustainable growth. So this is an important push that European policies are giving to standards and then to environmental protection. Coming back to the Circular Economy Action Plan, as I said, it's our really compass for the policy. The #2 was adopted in March 2020, so almost 2 years. So we are halfway in its implementation, but I think it's useful to recall what are some of the main flagships, especially since we are finalizing, I would say, the main actions, the one that will impact a lot the way we produce and consume. And I'm talking about a sustainable product policy framework with measures and directives for designing and improving the design, ensuring that sustainable products becomes the norms, measures to empower consumers, and then ensuring that green claims are also addressed. So these sets of initiatives that we're going to adopt in the coming months will really transform how we work and then how we impact the environment in Europe. The action plan has also identified a series of key product value chains where work is necessary, both from the policy perspective with specific measures, but also on standards. It's worth recalling them. We are going to work on electronics and ICT, Batteries in vehicles. In fact, we already adopted the revised batteries regulation. We're going to work on packaging and plastics packaging, and then all together other measures for microplastics, for example, on textiles, constructions and buildings, and also on food, water, and nutrients. So these are really the sectors where we have identified circularity potential that was untapped, and so we wanted to push forward with this. The action plan also identifies measures for waste, and then for a toxic-free environment, addressing secondary raw material and allowing them really to circulate in the economy without or reducing their negative impact. We have also put forward measures to address climate neutrality specifically, or research and innovation, so horizontal issues, and at the same time providing supports to regions and cities, having identified them as really the place or the right hotspot, if you want, for environmental impacts, and then the capacity to react and then to really move to the transitions. So the local dimension is highly addressed in this new circular economy action plan, together with also the global dimension, because as a novelty from the first action plan, the second action plan, circular economy action plan, also identifies measures for global, and then for the partnership that we have with India, but also in the context of larger multilateral relations. We have adopted an alliance, or we have led the efforts to develop an alliance on resource efficiency and circular economy, GACER, last February, and so we are really trying to move up the awareness of the potential of circular economies to reduce environmental impacts and to address environmental pollution. But so this is in a nutshell the action plan. If I want to come back and then to focus back on the standards and how we work with standards within the circular economy action plan, we actually use the traditional way of working of the European Union. So with the standardization bodies, we set up our annual plan where we identify standardization needs. And then we identify the request for standardization that we intended to put forward to the standardization bodies. These requests, of course, as you know, takes the shape of mandates. So it's really an annual work, and then it's really collegial consultation within the commissions to identify the needs accordingly to the different policies. And so you see from one side, you have the Green Deal that mainstreams the principles of circularity and resource efficiency on one side, and on the other, the traditional work of standardization that is combined and matches the need of such policies. What is, I think, interesting to know, and again, maybe some of the experts around the table already knows, but I would like to recall, this is the type of standards that we have. We have mainly two big categories, the harmonized standards and the non-harmonized standards. Why is this relevant, and what is the difference? So of course, the harmonized standards are much more powerful. They really allow a compliance and a presumption of conformity with the corresponding requirements in the legislation. So they always are linked to a specific legislation. They are really an enforcement tool that is very, very powerful. They are used to meet the essential requirements, for example, requirements on health or safety, or on protection of the environment. And then we'll see in a moment the type of requirements that we are working on, or that we're asking to work on. So then we can see how the legislations or they are relevant for enforcing the EU legislations. And then you have the non-harmonized standards. So these are standards that do not provide this presumption of conformity with legislation. So there is no link with, they are not cited in the official journal, for example, but they allow to give a message, and then they are developed also in consensus. So it's really one important piece of the puzzles in the larger world of type of standards. I think of, for example, the harmonized standards. Now going back to that first most important type, as an example, I'm thinking about REACH. So the system for.
Oh, no, I'm just sorry. I think maybe if you could just use the last 2-3 minutes to conclude,
Yes,
because we're just running time.
I'm coming to the end, as a matter of fact. Yes, I didn't want to develop too much on this knowing, and I would like I wanted to give these examples of type of standards that we use as an introduction, but then I'll jump immediately to it on the developments of standards that we are looking at in circular economy currently. So we are working on the standards for the eco design directive, as I was saying, and I'm thinking about standards for smartphones, for the cordless phones, for example, or for the tablets. At the same time, and what kind of standards? Standards that looks at the requirements like reparability, capacity to be disassembled, or preparation for reuse, reliability or recyclability, and then standards that provides information on environmental impacts, for example. Or so those are the type of requirements that will feature in the new standards that are used in combination with the Eco Design Directive. We are developing also and requiring work on standards for sustainability scoring. I'm thinking also of the standards that we are reviewing, so the methodology that it's underlying the eco design, the current eco design directive. So we are also looking at standards for that, and then standards for products that will feature in the new eco design work plan. So the one that will address energy related product and the non-energy related products, so those that will be linked to the new initiative on sustainable products. So with this, again, I was really wanted to give an overview of the policies and then how the mechanism, how we really work with standards and how important they are. I'll conclude here, and then again, I'll be available for specific question. I'll keep an eye on the chat and I'll give back the floor to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. And sorry, I had to just cut it short, but yeah, I think we have just another speakers. But yeah, I think what you just mentioned is quite interesting, especially I think you mentioned about consistency across the sectors and across the standards, and of course, policy harmonization, which is key. And yeah, I think I would, since we're just running behind a bit on our timing, I have a request from Asa's Denmark. Dr. Chatterjee, I'm sorry, I'll have to just make a bit of a change because she has to just leave for another meeting. And yeah, I think it flows directly into, Asa comes from the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. And yeah, I think if you could just also highlight what is it that you're doing as Environmental Protection Agency, and how do you think the role that the industry or the voluntary or the mix of the harmonized and the non-harmonized that was just mentioned by Paula. Yeah, further elaborate on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for letting me push the others down a little bit in the speaker list. So my name is Asa Denmark, and I work as mentioned at the Swedish EPA, mainly with plastics, but plastics in a circular economy. And as you all are aware, I guess there's lots of standardization needs, and that's also been described earlier here, also in the previous session. But as Ms. Rashna said here, I'm going to elaborate a little bit on the Swedish situation on behalf of the Swedish Ministry as well. And as you just got a very good description of circular economy and the status of circular economy in EU, Sweden as a member state is of course closely linked to what's going on an EU level, and both in terms of putting our views up to the EU level, but also in implementing what's coming from EU level in terms of legislation and work to be done, etc. So that's a very clear linkage, and we're working with all the things that was mentioned here before by the Commission. In Sweden, we have since 2020 a strategy and an action plan for circular economy as such. And this year we will be getting also a special action plan for plastic linked to this circular economy strategy. And of course, this strategy has a system perspective. Maybe you don't even have to mention those kinds of things, but of course it does. And it's seen as a driving force and an enabler in order for Sweden to reach the goal that we have on becoming a fossil-free nation by 2045. So circular economy is one of the key things that we could work with in order to reach that. And we have 3 different areas within the strategy, which is sustainable production and design, sustainable consumption of all kinds of resources, and then non-hazardous and circular value chains. And there's also information in English on this strategy if you would like to read more about it. And of course, when we dig from circular economy into plastic, which is more of my backyard, at the Swedish EPA, we have the role and the task by the Swedish government to run what's called the National Plastic Coordination. So we are trying to engage all kinds of different actors that are relevant for different plastic value chains in the task of reaching a more sustainable plastic use. And to be able to show and communicate what we are meaning, we have made our own roadmap in terms of what we think that a sustainable plastic use looks like. And if anyone's interested in that, it's also available in English, and I could provide links. But working with the roadmap and working with the plastic work in general and working with the strategy for circular economy, it's of course clear that we need to work also with standards. So of course we engage also in the standard work. We are financing, or have been financing, parts of the plastic works carried out by Swedish Institute for Standard, which is of course linked to the EU level as well, and we have some secretariats running regarding this. We're also engaged in the Circular Plastics Alliance, which is a business-driven but also commission-driven initiative, trying to increase the uptake of recycled content and also providing the possibilities of recycling. And in that work, there's a long list of standardization requests that's been now sent to SEN, and hopefully they will be approved, so that we could reach circular plastics economy. And it's terms like recyclability, recycled content, chain of custody, all those kinds of different issues that do matter and that you are well familiar with if you're working within this field. Last but not least, I'd like to mention also the work that Swedish government and also we are doing in terms of trying to get an international agreement on plastics going. Negotiations on that will hopefully start at the next UNEA meeting. And we're very excited about that. And in relations to that, of course, also more international standardizations and harmonized standards will be needed, so that we know that we are doing the same thing both in, as valid to say today, Sweden or India, but also of course across the globe. So that was a very brief overview. Super interesting to listen to all the other speakers here and really enhancing my own knowledge on this matter as well. But thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, as said, I do need to leave at 11. I'm so sorry for that, but you can always reach me afterwards. So thank you.
Thanks, Asa, for the brief and very very insights, because I think that's what brings a lot of value, where we see the need for these exchange, and of course targeted exchange, because India is still like there is a notification on extended producer responsibility, the draft. Mr. Satyendra Kumar already mentioned about it. And I think there is a much larger exchange required in terms of the digitalization, and also in terms of looking at how do you make the entire use of recycled content and implementation of EPR and those kind of frameworks, and of course have an exchange, because we are still in the phase of putting it forward and agreeing with the industry. So yeah, thanks a lot, and it brings a lot of potential for exchange further. I would now like to invite Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee, who is the scientist from the Ministry of Electronics, Information and Technology. He's been someone who's working across on the topic of e-waste, and I'm sure of the 11 committees that are mentioned by NITI Aayog, working around on NITI Aayog, the Ministry of IT is actually working along similar lines as we just heard Paula talk about the sustainable policy framework and designing standards or harmonizing standards which can actually look at repairability and across the value chain and bring in circularity. So yeah, I think that's something there. And yeah, I invite you, Dr. Chatterjee, to take over brief comments and remarks from your side on what is it that MITI is looking around on the circular economy action plan.
Thank you, Dr. Rachna. I'm audible?
We can hear you.
Hello. My slides are also visible, no?
Right, we can see your slides.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon to all in India, and good morning to other parts of the world. This is one of the important topic, as Mr. Sudhir Kumar from NITI Aayog has mentioned. Last year, NITI Aayog, the highest policy-making body in our country, they initiated 11 different particles, where electronic waste sector has been assigned to Ministry of Electronics and IT. So we developed action plan for different on different issues, embracing the awareness, creating standard, recycling infrastructure creation, skill development, and of course the improving the existing rules and regulation and guideline. So this actually discussion starts before this circular economy dialogue. If you see in 2018-19, we have a program under NITI Aayog with a European Union REI initiative, where MITI was also part. So we developed a resource efficiency and circular economy on electrical and electronics equipment sector. We published a strategy paper in 2019 January, where we have found is a vast informal sectors. They require to be upgraded. Capacity building would be required, and to enhance the resource efficiency, entire value chain require a different type of capacity building. Another initiative taken by another part of the NITI Aayog, where strengthening the recycling of e-waste was considered for strengthening actually rare earth requirement in the country for the economy. That also published in March, sorry, it is in August 2019. So that report actually emphasizes that we should have a eco park or integrated recycling facility in the country. So these are the initial background, and based on these two reports, last year NITI Aayog has mandated our ministry should come up with a action plan for that circular economy. As you all know, this approach requires which will reduce the pollution, as well as it will ensure the longer life of the product, and also the secondary raw material extraction and use for the new virgin product. And of course, US management, if you see in our country, there is a downstream approach where end of life and products are being considered. But along with that, if you strengthen the upstream part, that is material security, design for easy repairability, long life of the products are also required to be strengthened. This actually necessitates the policy shift from this linear economy to circular economy. Last July, MITI has submitted this action plan, and further NITI Aayog initiated the follow-up on action from November last year. So we have seen the major key action plan where design and other circular economy principles are also strengthened. We are talking about a sustainable product policy, talking about green skill development, green public procurement, tracking secondary raw material, adoption of use SEN-LAC, standards, having different labs to track how the secondary raw materials are used in the new product or virgin products. Also creating the infrastructure, affordable technology, local machine, skill development, awareness. So if you see the entire action plan submitted to NITI Aayog and then NITI Aayog further send us for initiating action, there are 57 different types of action, identified action, where 13 directly pertaining to our ministry, and there are regulatory improvement which actually pertains to environment ministry, and there are 14 others. There are multi-stakeholders ministries are involved where MITI can lead, and there are few more. There are MOEF or environment ministry will lead where MITI can be a supporting role. So overall, this vertical NITI Aayog asked MITI to coordinate. So we are having some nodal officer from various ministries, where Ministry of Environment and Forest, Urban Development, Skill Development, MSMEs, and other few state governments are also involved. So with that direction from NITI Aayog, we have actually initiated few action, few projects, few program, and we are coming up with some of the policy document. So one is actually awareness creation. We actually did similar type of awareness creation from 2015 to 2020 from the direction of Prime Minister of the country. So that was successful movement in the country. So similar fashion, we are now creating another pan-India awareness program where a multi-stakeholder involvement will be there from industry, from different type of NGOs, academic institutes, where it will be, we are thinking that it will be done through one of our societies. We are involved in skill development, NILET. Another program or projects we are trying to formalize, that will be a study of global best practices, which we can engage EU, RDI, and also the GIZ, and will be coming up some proposal, suitable proposal for that, where we should learn the global best practices, how the critical raw material and tracking secondary raw materials are being done, other parts of the country, what are the standards, how it is being maintained, how the integration and upgradation of informal sectors, and what are the frugal or affordable technology skill we can upgrade this informal fold. And also another very important aspects is sustainable product policy, which already you have made a committee where industries are also there, different type of GIZ we have a member, and also some academic institutes are also in member. We are trying to define what should be the sustainable product definition for the country. Based on that, we can further can have a green public procurement. Now, another committee has been formed to look into the product subscription or lease model instead of owning the product. So this is here also we have developed certain strategy paper. Then initially we will be implementing in our ministry. Then we will be will advise to other ministries to adopt this policy. Then the state government. So the owning of product can be eliminated. So products in the bulk consumer, especially government offices, can have a lease model, so that after lease is over, this product can be used for on other users, and hoarding of unnecessary equipment which is having a residual value after 3-4 months, 3-4 years, we can have a usability of products. So this is one of the initiatives we are taking. And best available technology where Eco Park was suggested earlier. Now we are having one scheme already, spec scheme for promoting electronic components. We are trying to change that specs scheme where all the recycling of the electronic waste product, that printed circuit board, lithium-ion battery, spent magnet, solar panel. So available 400 authorized recycler can be given a subsidy to upgrade their facility so that those state-of-art technology can be installed in our country. And apart from that, there is a sustainable product, cost-effective, indigenous. This is another actually initiative where we can handhold our informal sectors with the indigenous technology already we have developed. So around that, we are also creating another proposal, and one of our society who are developing indigenous technology. So they will be initiating this proposal. Apart from that, MOEF.
Sorry, Dr. Chatterjee, just requesting
yes,
you just take 2-3 minutes to close, please. Sorry.
So this MOEF is engaged in the regulatory part. This is entirely two-way. We are basically coordinated with that ministry. So I'm not going into details. Apart from that, there are some proposal which will be doing with the MSME ministry, and hand-holding to the ULB. It should be with the urban development ministries, and of course some of the long-term activity like create the value chain, trading, integration of secondary raw material, where global best practices has to be learned. So these are the major actually activity we have taken. As all other experts are also mentioned, we should go for a design for environment, and we should have a better life of the product. Awareness is one of the important part. Then if we have you can have a rules or regulation like right to repair, eco level, so that will actually benefit the entire value chain. That is all from my side. Dr. Rajna.
Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee, and I'm sorry to ask you to just move through the slides quickly. But yeah, I think it was quite interesting to see the entire ambitious program, and of course cutting it short to short-term, medium, and long-term measures. And you are already kind of initiated few of the actions, which is I think quite moving towards the direction. And I already see a lot of opportunities, as Paula just shared, like in the EU also they're developing currently the framework, the sustainable product policy. In India as well, you're looking at developing, and of course the last slide on the conclusions where you actually mentioned the three, like the entirely addressing social, economic, environmental benefits together. Yeah, so I think it's quite a holistic approach, and I'm sure from the EU side there would be a lot of interest to exchange the developments and also maybe align the Indian challenges and just see of how do you make a benefit. So thanks a lot. And with this, I would now move to our speakers from the industry, because I think we have heard the government, we have seen what the policy guidance framework is all about. I'll now invite Ms. Catherine. She is from SUEZ, S-U-E-Z, and she's representing a committee which is on circular economy. Maybe could I, yeah. Now I see you. Okay. Yeah. So since you're already part of our ISO committee on circular economy, it would be interesting to hear your experiences, and also how do you think a lot of ways how India is moving, and as well in the sector, where do you see an entire potential for change? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I share my screen. I don't know if you can see that. It's okay.
We can see it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Could just make it full screen. I still see your...
Yes, I try, but it's a new, or maybe Reva, you have my presentation in the right format. So if you can share your screen, could be also good. Because I am in between.
Sure, just give me a minute.
Okay, thank you very much. It will be easier like that. Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be with you today and to share about what we are doing at international level of standardization, and to share that. And India is part of countries having a voice into this international standardization. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So we all know what we want to do. We would like to, with the circular economy, we would like to change our way of production and our way of consumption, because we know all that we face to an environmental emergency due to the climate change, resource depletion, and so on. And of course, we know that planetary boundaries are reached for some of them, or exceeded. So we need to work to answer, to provide an answer, and circular economy could be an answer to find an alternative model and to be able to decouple this global economy from the consumption of limited resources. That's why we would like to propose that. Next slide, please. I think you will receive the slide, so it will be easier after that to think about that. So a new technical committee has been proposed 2 years ago at international level to draft international standards around that, and the scope is there. We have to work in the field of circular economy for sure, but to develop some guidelines, guidance, framework, and so on, to be able to implement in a pragmatic way circular economy within our organizations, private, public organizations, small groups, SMEs also, and to be able to maximize the contribution to sustainable development. That means that we want to tackle, to contribute to the SDGs, saying that we want to contribute to the sustainable development. And so our mind is to be able to integrate system life, system thinking, in processes, to be able to consider waste as a resource, and by the end of the day to have no waste if it's possible. We want to cooperate, to demonstrate that we have to cooperate along the value chain, to integrate value networks, and so on, and to have a long-term vision, to be able to integrate within our vision not only profit, not only revenues, but also environmental and social impact of human activities. Next slide, please. And so more than 80 countries are currently participating to this job. And what you can see is that Europe and India together participate to that, and are very active within this technical committee. Next slide, please. And yes, maybe the most important slide for you with the next one. This slide is to show you what we are doing, the work program we currently decided to be able to provide, at the end of the day, a package to facilitate circular economy implementation within our organizations, private or public organizations. And that means that we are currently working on different texts. The main one is the ISO, the coming ISO 59004. And in this standard, you will be able to have the definition of circular economy, the principles on which we want to base our comprehension of circular economy, the framework to implement that, and some examples to be able to know what it means for an organization to implement that. We will complete this view with the guidance for business models and value networks, how to switch transform our linear business model to circular one, and another text under elaboration, 59020, very important, because we want to show how to measure, how to assess circularity at different levels, at product level, at regional level, city level, or organization level. So with KPIs, which kind of KPIs you can use, social, environmental, and economic KPIs to demonstrate that you are circular, or that the product, the service, the solutions you provide are circular. And we have some other text we are currently writing, but it's more a technical report, as you can see in the bottom of the slide, just to give you some feedback examples of currently experiences. Next slide, please. And just to focus on the first standard we are just writing regarding terminology, principles, and framework for implementation. We think that circular economy, what you can see on the screen, is a work in progress. So be sure that it could evolve, because we will have to follow the ISO process before publishing the text. That means that we will have some ballots and we will have to improve what we are currently doing. But up to now, what we decided regarding the definition of circular economy is that you can see on the screen that it's an economic system that uses a systemic, holistic approach to maintain a circular flow of resources by regenerating, retaining, or adding to their value while contributing to sustainable development. So each word is important, and we are working on definition on that, because what you can see on the screen is the four part of the current standard. First part regarding the terminology, so to give you definitions, to be able to understand what we mean by circular economy, what we mean by products, services, solutions, resources, renewable resources, by business model, and so on. This is the first part. The second part is really focusing on the principles. What are the principles you must have in mind to be able to implement circular economy? And as I said just before, it's a system thinking, to be able to have an holistic approach, to be able to integrate a life cycle perspective within your processes. You have to be able to create value, to share value. So there is a social part within that. There is a collaborative part within this kind of thing, to be able to share the value between stakeholders, between all along the value chain, all within a value networks. And you have to think also about resource availability, resource traceability, because we know that resources are we are living in a in only one planet, so we have to take that into account. So we have to push reuse, recycling, refurbishing, and so on, what we said just before with all the presentations. And we have to consider ecosystem resilience, because we have to think about the planetary boundaries. So that are the principles, and on the principles, you are able to build your vision, your strategy, your action, and you are able to monitor all of that, so your framework for implementation of circular economy. And we wanted to add a last part to this standard, to be able to give users some information regarding the actions they are able to implement, to be more concrete, and to be able to push implementation of circular economy. So we speak about circular design, about sustainable procurements, about reverse logistics, and so on, about in the industrial and territorial symbiosis. Are you able, when you are an industry, for instance, to be able to connect with other industries, because some waste of one are resource for other, or you can share some energies, and so on. So it's a really part to push implementation. And last slide, I guess. Yes, we have in mind to publish as soon as possible, but taking into account that we have to produce some quality texts. So next year, by the end of next year, I hope so, we will be able to provide all this package. And as a conclusion for the last slide.
Deleted all the other ones.
Next slide, please, Reva. Yes, so we have to implement circular economy within our organizations because we need to switch to alternative models. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And I think the entire package is very, very interesting. The way it covers and addresses a lot of things. I would just immediately move to our next speaker from the industry, Mr. Kamal Bali. He's the MD. He's the representing Volvo Group and has been Volvo Group India and has been involved with a lot of work around circular economy. So over to you, Mr. Kamal. And
Thank you, Dr. Rachna. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Dr. Rachna, how much time do I have?
I would say 6 minutes, largely.
Okay, fine.
For you to do.
Fine. I just wanted to know that. Yeah, good. Pleasure to be here to participate in this very important webinar, seeking urgent actions for a sustainable future. What I'm going to do over the next 5 to 6 minutes is going to share some of the stuff which is happening at Volvo and across various Swedish companies, and how are we really approaching this topic when it comes to feet on the ground, So I think that's something which we need to talk about. I think a very interesting and comprehensive framework has been set out by previous speakers. So I think I will build on that. So we all know that the world's natural resources are finite and limited, even as economic activity continues to expand rapidly. The key implication of this is that there would be for rethinking and reimagining production, transportation, logistics, and the existing usage patterns. But what we need is greater awareness across board. Clearly, across two pillars when it comes to industry. Number one, waste and pollution need to be designed out. And second, raw materials, components, and products need to be designed to be kept in use for a longer period of time. This may mean reuse or encourage second life through remanufacture, repurposing, or recycling. Meanwhile, an important actor in this value chain, that is the transport industry, actually can play a significant role by bringing in improvements in the logistics productivity, because that's one sector where efficiency levels are pretty low, and I'll come back to that in a moment. For instance, sharing economic business models, AI and machine learning for aggregation and optimization of cargo, routes, and goods flow can lead to reduction in transport needs and save valuable natural resources. For Swedish companies across sectors, let me confirm that circularity and resource efficiency are two very important subsets of a sustainable future. For instance, Volvo Group is aiming for our own captive transport system to be one of the best in the world, reducing logistics costs, emissions, and wasted resources. And what we will learn in this journey over the course of the next 7 to 8 years is going to be implemented and offered to our own customers in their transport systems. Our aim is to contribute 100% additional productivity improvements in the customer's logistics operations by 2030 from the current levels. Meanwhile, Ericsson is creating a world of limitless connectivity where mobile technology opens up with new possibilities to pioneer a sustainable future. And IKEA, on the other hand, aims to be fully circular by 2030 and is creating a development plan for future circular supply chain. It is also innovating with newer materials such as natural fibers and then graduating to renewable or recycled materials. The key here is Dr. Rachna, I wanted to focus on is that it's the partnerships which is going to really be very, very critical. I think the future will be based on partnerships from customers to suppliers to startups to authorities to policymakers and to financing agencies. Therefore, a webinar like this will do a lot of good to this subject. Let me share with you very quickly that at Volvo we plan to participate in providing optimization services across the value chain, whether it is vehicle part service or vehicle uptime services, vehicle productivity, fleet productivity or mobility services, because this is very important because increasing transport efficiency offers opportunities to add sustainable value beyond fuel consumption and electrification. According to estimates, assets such as trucks, buses, and construction equipment are on an average to the extent of used only 30% during their life cycle. And the average truck on the road carries less than 50% of its total capacity. So that is the kind of waste in the system which needs to be tackled. With this in mind, and the fact that almost 10% of world's fuel is consumed to move goods and materials, the climate and cost efficiency component for transport is significant, both for business and for a sustainable future. And I think this can be a game changer if we can tackle it well. So very, very quickly, I will take just a couple of more minutes in the interest of time. I will just touch upon some steps to increase circularity. I think the design phase is very critical. We are looking at all the elements like materials, fuels, exhaust system, all of that. And then there is a production phase where how do we look at various elements to reduce the CO2 footprint. And then, of course, there is a disposal and the facilities infrastructure where we are looking at landfills and how can we make it zero landfills, absolutely. And then finally, this registered vehicle scrappage centers which the government of India has come up with a policy can be another game changer to establish and create a huge positive resource efficiency and circularity. And I think this can be one of the very big ones because there are many vehicles which are more than 15 years old, which can be recycled. If we can do it scientifically, we can make a huge difference. So just to say that Swedish companies in India and Volvo in particular here, who I represent, we can confirm that we are working in that direction in a very, very big way. And we will look forward to collaborating and creating platforms. And we are already working on some platforms like CITES, which is Sweden-India Transport Innovation and Safety Platform, where 14 different partners are working towards solving a particular problem. So I think this as well will need a lot of partnerships and a lot of awareness where customers should also demand products of this nature. I think that is, so it's going to be an orchestra where every partner has to play the game. So I will stop there in the interest of time, Dr. Rachna. Open to any questions, if any. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you so much for keeping it short and to the point. I think it's very, very valuable, and also to see some of the points that you mentioned, that how transport, and especially since the previous speaker highlighted that they're defining or bringing out the implementation framework, not just from the transport or mobility, but also from the reverse logistics. Because I think that's how the entire discussion on EPR and other sets of frameworks which will promote at least like better waste collection, if not minimization, at least better waste collection from that point of view. So really quite, and I'm sure there would be some questions for you in the chat box, which we can just take it up later. Moving further, I would now like to invite Mr. Raul Carlson. He's from the Swedish Research Institute. And I'm sure there's already a lot of it that you would have as an academician, as a researcher, to bring forward to us and, of course, share your insights on.
Thank you. I expect to share my presentation. I expect that I need to be given that right before I can do that. I try. Let's see what happens. Now I think I share my screen. Is that right? If no one answers, I guess it works.
It does. It works, yes.
Yeah, good. So yes, my name is Raoul Karlsson. I work at Research Institutes of Sweden, which is the big combined industrial and societal research institute for all different aspects. We have combined them in the recent years from many different previous institutes. The theme I will address is circular economy for coherent value and trust. And I think that what has been presented up to here is very much the context of what I am going to present. So I start with talking about value, because we know that circular economy is very much about resource value. We're not taking care of resources in general, but the one that we think is valuable and we put value into them. So just to use a very simple presentation to begin with, saying that we have to invest value in order to extract materials from resources, from natural resources, and we put more investment into these to produce materials that we can actually use to produce products. And then we make components, for example, components for Volvo trucks or Volvo cars, and eventually we make the product, which is really the tools that are highly valuable. That is the one that makes us live the world the way we live. But the problem is that eventually they start to decay, they become older, they can become more unmodern, and they are to be scrapped and they are to be wasted. And this, of course, is the whole idea with the linear economy. And we invest values and we lose values, and we keep doing that all the time. We did invent recycling, of course, and we can do this again. But every time we do recycling, we, of course, have to put more natural resources into it. And I call this a resource value roller coaster. We keep investing and we keep losing, and we keep investing and losing all the time. There is an interesting report that I would like to market. I have not been participating with writing it. It's material economics. It's about preserving value in EU industrial materials, where they have followed aluminum, plastics, and steel for one use cycle, from purchasing the materials and seeing how they end up after recycling. We can see that the economic values are really diminishing, even though recycling is wonderful. We see that steel, for example, there's 67 billion worth of steel bought into the production, and what comes out is 31 million value of steel, which means that we have lost 56 billion euros value of steel for one use cycle. And it's even worse for plastics. We buy 62 billion euros of plastics, and after one loop we have 7 billion of value, which is, of course, economic catastrophe. And aluminum is pretty good. It's only half of all the value that is being lost in the recycling. And so part of it is volume loss and part of it is price loss. But I can really recommend that report, because it's interesting to see what type of economy we have unless we move to the circular economy. And again, also, I mean, Katrine also already presented what we do in TC 323 and ISO, and I will use that because that is kind of where I spend much of my work days. I participate in how to measure circularity, and that is also how I will present where I am in this group here. Circular economy, the definition up there to the left, the circular economy is an economic system that uses a systemic approach to maintain a circular flow of resources by regenerating, retaining, or adding their value while contributing to sustainable development. Everything here is directed towards resources. Either you precise that resources and their value, but on the other hand, anything is a resource only because it has a value. That's why we consider it a resource. So having said that, that is what we're doing. The red box is there. That is how we, in the 59020 standards development, are trying to grasp what is circular economy, how to measure it. And they have the strategies here in reduce, repair, maintain. Everybody know these circular economy words. We want to ensure that we don't just do them, but we really want to achieve minimal resource flows, and we want to retain, regenerate, and create resource flows into society in the way that they do not harm social impact, environmental impacts, and economic impacts. And that is what we try to achieve in that work. But since we are so much value-based in that, we of course run into problems. What is value? And this, again, this definition over here, value is gain from satisfying needs and expectations in relation to the use of resources. And then we mean all the good things that exist: revenues, savings, productivity, sustainability, satisfaction, everything is value. Of course, we understand that. And since everything good is in there, we really need standardization. We need standardization that helps us define resource value coherently when we want to prioritize, when we want to say that this circular economy solution really provides secondary jobs, it provides new value to the consumers, whoever it provides value to. We need to define these coherently to be able to play on international ground when it comes to all types of trades and agreements. And here we are struggling in the standardization. It's difficult because we are trying to get a good overall framework, but value is so much related to us and as persons and as politics. Again, using this one for another aspect of these circularity strategies, we talk about retaining product lifetime. When we do that, we retain resource value. And again, I start with a linear economy, just take it up from the nature and throw it back into a whole. But we want to at least make the product lifetime longer. In this case, it becomes 5 times longer, which means that we can save 5 lifetimes of investment and losses. Of course, it is good. Other ways to do that is to find smart way to refurbish them in between, so we can reuse new products, old products, without having to take the whole road from the mining up down to the losses again. These are excellent ways if you think about them, about the entire national economy, not having to spend and lose all the time, but actually elevating the society on a higher level is good economy. Basically, we can do other things with these investment values and whatever that may be, but to always do the same thing all over and over is of course not good. So when we can also expect longer lifetime. So what is longer and whatever lifetime refurbishment in between? I borrow this one is not for the standardization. We don't do messy jobs like that. Then we would never agree. But this is a research work by Murakami in Japan. He's also participating in the work, but he has not presented this to our work. But you can see that here we have a number of different lifetimes. Over to the right there, residential time of substance in economic sphere. Of course, it's a key question for circular economy. Another one is the lifetime for first owner, second owner, and third owner. That is another type of lifetime. And then we have extended service lifespan. For example, if you have scrapped the car, then you can get the car's parts and put them into a new car, for example. So there's so many different lifetimes, and it's of course messy for a consumer. So thinking about this situation, that you're a producer, could be Volvo, and you're a consumer, any customer in the end, and you want to know that what you are actually investing in. Now I think of a regular customer, what you're investing in is some earphones, and you would not like to buy new because the cable falls off, or Bluetooth is no longer connecting. There are so many ways that you just fill up your drawers at home, or this also happens in the industrial case. You try to make the best choice, but in the end you might not be able to know where you are. So one would need to have some kind of standard to establish this trust. Maybe the standard in itself could be trustworthy, but it's always necessary for different products to have different lifetime criteria. A paper machine, of course, has different lifetime criteria than earphones. And again, trucks has, again, different lifetimes than these two. So one have to have criteria specific product categories, and one have to have a way to verify this so that this trust can be really reliable. One should not have to operate for 50 years to establish trust in order for the customers to know that they're going to have a good lifetime on the products. So what I say, standardization here is needed to establish trust for the many new ways that products will be given long and many lives. There will be innovation, and we should not stop innovation, but we should support innovation. So coming to the conclusion, circular economy addresses resource value, and resource value is economy for national economy or for company economy. We need standardization for circular economy to coherently describe aspects of value and really addressing what is the resource value. We need it for prioritizing material choices, for prioritizing logistics. And we need also to establish trust for product lifetime innovation. We need to elevate the whole idea of lifetime innovation so that all the different partners throughout the entire life cycle can trust each other throughout the way, by the way they're doing this. So this is what I can see, the message I give. This is what I can see, that now we are really in the bits and pieces in the international standardization. These two things are not there. We expect them to kind of be solved, but we need to do it. No standards are written by themselves and not by the ISO office. It's us who do them. So cooperation here is needed. I mean, that's the thing. We cannot come to the table with complete news. We have to have done things. So we need different coherent resource value aspects to look at what are the value aspects, for example, for a social system where you know that new types of jobs come in. There might be risks because they're second-hand material, but there also might be opportunities for completely new innovation. We talk very much about traceability here, for example, over the different value and innovation. And we also talk about product lifetime. We are now establishing within RISE a new type of certification for product lifetime to enable this communication between consumers and producers. We're trying it out and we have ideas, but we know that we have to have an international standardization because there is no one inventing entirely new products for only Swedish markets. So we have to be very, very broad on this. So there we really want to have cooperation. So of course, that's my Android.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Roll. It was quite impressive, and I really buy your statement that standardization would help in building, not only just building trust, but also building trust for the innovation that we are looking at, considering the circular value chains. So yeah, I think it's been quite an enriching session. We have actually entered, 20 minutes late, and we have kind of managed to keep that 20 minutes delay still in our discussion. Yeah, it's difficult for the next set of speakers and moderators to handle, but yeah, I'm sure we will still manage a bit on the time. It's been very interesting session, hearing all of you coming from the government, coming from the industry, coming from research side. I think we have kind of come to a common conclusion, or at least a discussion element, that of course we need an enabling framework, a framework which is much more robust, built through partnerships, built through collaborations and cooperations, because I think this has to be across with the businesses, with the policymakers, and there is a much larger role which the EU in India, or the EU through our initiative could actually look at least in terms of creating dialogues where the harmonization, the consistency that we've heard in the first session, also in this session, is actually key, that you actually get the dialogue up in discussion, and also kind of create the need for developing this consistency across the standards, across different sectors. And since traceability is something which all of the different government policies are trying to address in the EU, in India, where EU is already pioneering and India is progressing on that path, I would say this is quite an interesting dialogue, and we look forward to facilitate similar discussions further. So yeah, thanks to all of you, and over to you, Reva.
Thank you, Rachna. Before all the panelists from session 2 go after this intensive discussion and presentations, I would like to ask you all to turn on your video so that we can take a group picture, please. If we have everybody, then I would request Priya to take a picture of everyone. Thank you, everyone. So we have already heard on what is happening, what is the political will, where we are moving, what kind of frameworks do we need, the kind of work that is ongoing in both EU and India, what the industry is doing, different member states in EU are doing, and there seems to be obviously a great consensus on the need for circular economy and resource efficiency standards. And with that, we will go into the next session, which is being moderated by Mr. Dinesh Chandra Sharma, and he is the Director for Standards and Public Policy in the EU project, SESAI. So SESAI is the standard European standardization project in India, seconded European standardized project in India. I'll let Dinesh give you more information. And Dinesh will, in this session, look at standards, perspective and partnership in more detail. The last session we discussed policy and standards, and now we will discuss more in depth about standards. And we have, like the last session, we have a very interesting lineup for this one as well. So I want to hand it over to Dinesh. Dinesh, over to you.
Thank you very much, Reva. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I hope all my panelists are on board. With that, let me welcome you to this third and the last session of today's webinar, after having such an intense discussions in the last two sessions. In this session, as Reva highlighted, we will be talking more into standard, take a deep dive down. And we are not talking about any sector specific, but we will have the overall overview of these standards activities in EU and India, including, in the last session, you heard from Catherine. She talked about the ISO TC 323. So with that, we have a limited time. Let me say a few words that we are honored to have amongst us the panelists from national as well as international organizations who are involved into the standard development activities, and not only standard development activities, but even the implementation side of it, covering the topic of resource efficiency, circular economy, and sustainability. Our first panelist I would like to invite is Professor S.K. Sharma. And before I ask him to intervene, let me briefly introduce Mr. Professor S.K. Sharma. He's a chairman of technical committee at BIS, which is the CHT 34 under the chemical department, and it is a counterpart or a national mirror committee of ISO TC 323, which you heard from Ms. Catherine in the last session. Professor Sharma is a professor emeritus and former Dean University Instructions. He is Chemical Engineering Department and a founding director of Energy Research Center, Punjab University. Professor Sharma has more than 38 years of successful experience. And for the last 10 years, he has been heading or working on this TC, which is a counterpart of ISO 323 on circular economy. Also had the co-chair position at the ad hoc group on carbon footprints and trade, constituted by the ISO TC 207. Professor Sharma is going to share with us BIS standardization activities taking place at BIS regarding this circular economy. May I request Reva to please present the slides of Professor Sharma before I kindly invite him to share his interventions. Thank you, Reva, and over to you, Professor Sharma.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you please bring on the first? I am really grateful to the organizer for inviting me to participate in this very important workshop. And my take is that I first tell you that why circular economy is important for India. Lots of speakers have already said. So I'll say that our raw material consumption is very low at this particular time. And we consume 1/12 of the total raw material extracted globally. But if we continue our current linear economy model, then our raw material requirement is going to triple to 15 billion tons by 2030 and 25 billion tons by 2050. Main drivers are growing middle class, unprecedented level of urbanization, and most important thing is why we need circular economy is India imports more than 77% of energy requirements. India imports 80 to 100% of critical raw material. So we need to, look at the circular economy, and already the government of India has put in a lot of efforts in this direction. Next one, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So in India, the focus area of circular economy basically are the two areas apart from all other. One is the abiotic material, that is steel and aluminum. Why it is so? Because the production in 2020 was 3.55, and opportunity for utilization of the waste and scrap is very important. And similarly, the second area is the steel, where we are reached around 140 million tons. And recycling, it is very important. Of 1 ton of scrap saves around 1.1 tons of iron ore, 0.6 to 7 tons of coking coal, and around 0.2 to 3 tons of fluxes. So this is very important, that if we take up the circular economy, we will be able to bridge some of the gap. And e-waste is another area. Already the speakers have told about this, and we produce around 5.2 million tons per annum. And the construction and demolition waste is a very important area. 150 million tons only is recycled, that is around 1%. And Bureau of Indian Standard has already brought out a standard which describes the use of concrete made from recycled material, and processing, the construction, and the disposal of the waste. And already states have enacted the regulations that you have to, for example, I live in a Chandigarh, and already the government of the city has said that everybody will have to recycle it, and they are giving back some of the raw material if you give your waste to the this is a good model for propagating this. Next, please. Next one, please. Yeah, so BIS has a CID 34. Under this committee, we have, three committees. One is for the sustainability standard, other is for circular economy, and the third one is for carbon sequestering use. So we have made a number of standards. Very important aspect which I would like to bring to the notice of the participants, especially from the developed countries, is that most of the standards which are being developed by the developed countries are basically conducive for the big industries. They are not modular in nature. So with the result that India, which has largest, you could say, concentration of medium and small scale industries, these standards cannot be used by our larger segment of the society. And you could see the areas that, for example, when the carbon foot standards were being formulated, India put in a point of view that these standards should be modular, so that small to medium to large scale industries could use it, as happened in the case of ISO 14001 or ISO 14040. So if the developed countries are trying to promote these circular economy standard or recycle standard, they must take into consideration that the economic conditions of the Indian industry and the technical expertise available and the other infrastructure is not conducive to take care of these standards. I am glad that Catherine was here. She was a speaker. She is heading TC 323. And I am very hopeful that because she has a great concern for the developing countries, our TC 323 standards, 4 standards will be modular in nature, and they could be utilized by the industry, which are from small to medium to the high industry. And the Indian, CI 34 has, they have, prepared sustainability standards. What we are doing is that when we feel that some particular standard is not meeting the requirements of our medium or small scale industries, we are preparing our own standards on sustainability and other allied areas. And already we have produced around 25 standards on sustainability issues, and 5 more are in the process. Next one, please. Next one, please. So, you see already there are two great speakers who are on circular economy. One was Catherine, another is Carl. So you see Rahul Carlson is very much involved in this. Catherine has already given you the details of all these 5 standards which are being formulated, and EDI is playing a very important role in the formulation of this standard. I don't want to take more time because already all these have been discussed. Thank you very much.
Dinesh, we don't hear you.
Dinesh, you're muted.
Yes, Mr. Sharma, any? Hello? I'm finished.
Yes, thank you, sir. I think something went wrong with my mic. I am sure I'm audible now. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you very much, Professor Sharma, for your intervention, and I concur and agree with you. I'm going to say is probably now the way the world is economy, the way the economy is evolving with all the startup ecosystem. I'm sure the global bodies, with India's contribution, will amend or make these standards modular so that it becomes applicable in India. So whatever has been developed under your leadership about addressing these SMEs and MSMEs will be taken up at the global platform. Thank you very much for your intervention and sharing these updates. With that, let me move. Thank you very much, sir. With that, let me move on to our next speaker. I would like to invite Mr. Bimal Mahendru. Before I ask him to share his presentation or intervention, I would like to briefly take the pleasure of introducing him. People know him, and he has been a very strong advocate of standardization, not only in India, but globally. Mr. Bimal Mahendru, with more than 32 years of professional experience, which is spanning around manufacturing, marketing, international operations, governance, advocacy, and strategy. His core competencies lies in strategic development, cross-cultural management, the regulatory framework, digital transformation, and more importantly, which you heard him since morning with his chats and the questions responses, sustainability, which has become very important. And especially over the last 5 years, as an IEC ambassador from India, from India, he has been leading an advocate of sustainability and especially the UN SDGs through effective glorification of technologies, and is associated with IEC Standardization Management Board SMB as a member from India. And he's also chairing a very important technical committee or a system committee at IEC, which is focusing on the low voltage direct current LVDC, and he's also actively member in various electro divisional council at BIS. So floor is yours, sir. We are waiting to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dinesh. I trust you can see my slides. Appreciate
that
introduction.
Yes, please.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I started with about 38 slides, trimmed it to 8 slides, trimmed it to 5 slides, and now I'm going to present only 2 slides just to make sure that I can meet your time specifications. I also want to especially mention at the outset, I have learned a lot from all the earlier speakers, and I think brilliant work being done across the world. All the speakers presented some very important aspects. For IEC, circularity, resource management is at the heart of what we are trying to build into standards. Everyone knows that standards are a consensus product. I can sit in my small room with a few people and do a great global standard, but it has no value if I don't have consensus from all the stakeholders who are going to use it and live the impact of that standard. So building consensus is critical. And I am coming from that point of view. I want to specially mention also, and maybe later on I'll put it in the chat for all the listeners today, two important IEC committees. One is the IEC Advisory Committee on Environment Aspects, which is ASEA. This is looking after the horizontal aspects of environment, circular economy, etc., and is advising the standardization board of the IEC. The other is TC 111, and I'm delighted to share that the chair of this committee is also available on this discussion today, Christophe Garnier. This committee is specially focused on the vertical of environment aspects for electrical equipment, products, and systems. So a very relevant committee going forward. Let me come to this slide, and this is one of the two slides I wanted to share. My personal view is that whenever we look at circular economy, there are four aspects to it. The first one is, of course, about the market, the policy, the regulations, etc. The second is about human behavior, how we engage with, that is the left side of this. And the one where we are involved, where IEC is working and where standardization aspects and the resource efficiency comes into play, is this, which is the yellow highlighted boxes, where the circular design, eco design, closing the material cycles, which several of the speakers have talked of. Of course, advocacy and consumer behavior are important aspects which we are beginning to realize, but that's not part of the discussion that I will be making today, and I'll be focusing just on these two aspects. Within these, if you look at this slide, and to me, this is at the heart of circular economy and resource management. You can see from the bottom to the top, right from disposing to recovering, recycling, refurbishing, remanufacturing, reuse, repair, upgrade, and right up to the notion of consuming less. At each stage, there can be standards. Which standards are we focusing on? I strongly believe, and this is where the contribution of IEC comes in, that at each stage, there is work happening. Even what finally gets disposed of into the landfills, what is the definition of something coming at the absolute end of its use as a recyclable or reusable product? I think right from those definitions, we are moving onward. We are also working on standards related to recovering and recycling. How does recycling take place? I come from the electrical community, and you can all very well imagine that in the electrical economy, there is a lot of waste which is generated historically because electrical networks are present everywhere. How do we make sure that these networks genuinely become part of the circular economy? This is where a lot of the work is happening. IEC is beginning to start working with standards for eco design, for example. Eco design is a term used where a lot of these aspects, right from design of a product for repair, reuse, upgradability, repurposing, refurbishing, are built into the product itself. You will all recall that just a few months back, there was a major lawsuit between a major mobile phone manufacturer who said that, well, our products are not meant for recycling because there is a certain warranty and everything gets finished if you even think of recycling our products. Of course, this company lost that lawsuit because every consumer, once they paid for the product, they had the right to make sure that the product lives a longer life. And some of the speakers earlier today have actually talked about this. So the message I want to give is that standards are not just at one level of this work. Standards are required at all the levels. Second, standards have to be consensus standards. It's not just a small committee sitting in a room which can decide for the rest of the world. Consensus building is at the heart of it. Buy-in, that's where the buy-in from the industry, the policymakers, regulators, users, consumers, everyone will take place. And once there is consensus, I'm sure implementing standards becomes a lot easier. This is part of the work that is being done in ISO. I know there is some very active work happening. There is a good collaboration between ISO and IEC at that level to try and address circularity and building eco-design principles right into the standards for products. PC 111 is bringing a lot of valuable knowledge to all the IEC committees. And you will notice that in the next couple of years, these aspects will begin to show in all electrotechnical equipments which are built to standards coming from the IEC. Finally, I want to close by this slide, get engaged. I strongly believe, and I'm convinced, that we all inherited a wonderful earth to live in, to grow in. I was born in a small town in India, and it was wonderful. It was very pleasant. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same for our children. I'm not a grandparent now, but soon I'll be a grandparent. But are we really proud of the world we are leaving behind as a legacy? Can I really leave it for the government and big organizations to bring about a change and create a better world with circular economy and all the good things that go with it? The change happens and begins individually also. Can I contribute to this? Can I be more responsible in my consumption and my footprint on this world? If I can focus on that, I think we would have started moving toward a better place. I would love to work with all of us together to make sure that our grandchildren also inherit a much better world than we inherited from our grandparents. With that, Dinesh, I hand back over to you. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vimalji. It's always a pleasure to hear you out, your thoughts. And what can I say, that the consensus and the engagement, these are the strongest pillar we need to build on when we build a standard, because at the end of it, standards are for the industry, built by the industry, for the use by the industry. At the end of it, it should benefit the consumer. And lastly, when you said consumer is also an integral part of it, because at the end of it, they're going to face the challenges. They're going to face the next world. So thank you very much for your participation, for your acceptance, and to be a part of this webinar. Thank you very much. We move on to our next speaker. And just to remind all the panelists, there will be questions. There are questions getting posted on our Q&A panel. Please go there. Whoever thinks that they can address those questions, please address those questions. These questions will be consolidated at the end of the webinar, and then we'll send it to all the panelists. Thank you. We move on to our next panelist, Dr. Sunita Purushottam. Dr. Sunita Purushottam is a head of sustainability at Mahindra Life Space Developers Limited. She has over 25 years of work experience in sustainability, strategy, and environmental consultancy, covering many areas such as environmental impact assessment, air pollution modeling and metrology, greenhouse gas emissions and carbon offsets, carbon neutrality strategy, waste management strategy and water risk, technology solutions for sustainability, and CSR, corporate social responsibility. She's a physics postgraduate with PhD in environmental science and engineering from IIT Mumbai. It's a pleasure to have you on board, Dr. Sunita Purushottam. And she's going to share with us the circular economy more from a real estate perspective, covering policies on resource efficiency, but with a question that what next. So thank you very much for joining, and please, floor is yours for next 8 minutes, please, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm not sure whether I'm audible, visible, my slides are visible.
You are audible, your slides are visible. Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Awesome, awesome. I'm just trying to see how I can reduce this. Okay, so I'll just take a much more, from a framework standard I'll talk about it, but what I wanted to share was more the reality on the ground, right? And given that I am in the real estate sector, I will touch upon two main areas, right? So basically, what is the need for action, especially when it comes to the real estate sector, the current scenario, a little bit around the circular economy policy framework in our sector, and what ahead, and what are the challenges that we face. Okay, so when you look at sustainable construction, there are many models to look at, right? So green building design is the first thing, and we have a 100% green certified portfolio, and that's the starting point, I would say. Then you go for advanced design. Advanced design, it allows you to look at orientation, passive components, which not only help you reduce the operational energy, water demand, but also, we can look at how we can reduce the amount of concrete, steel, cement. So it's primarily design optimization, embodied carbon, and so on. So advanced design software for planning simulation and looking at how the embodied carbon and what kind of structural plus sustainability related decisions can be driven by these simulation softwares. The third part is looking at material supplies from renewable sources and alternative materials. The fourth aspect is recycled construction material use. And then, of course, resource efficient construction. Resource efficient construction, often we find that delays of drawings or not getting the right drawing or not using the right version of drawing can lead to loss of material, because then somebody will not like that design what you have created, and the project staff will have to redo the whole thing. So there are certain things even around the efficiency on how you make a building that you have to be careful about. So the project management, the drawing sharing, how do you reduce materials throughout? And of course, now we're talking about prefabrication, reusable formwork. Reusable formwork has caught on like anything, especially for high rise. 3D printing is not yet there in India as much, but there are recently World Economic Forum had posted on 3D printing that how do you use a certain type of foam and lot less structure so that you can actually reduce the material consumption by a huge percentage. Then excess material recycling, preventing the waste, and that is through ensuring that your project staff at site know how to recycle, keep the materials, have 5S. So these are all standards around, I would say the standard around environment management system actually helps us to look at how do we manage the waste at site, right? So that's an interesting part. That is a standard that has been there for such a long time, is also an enabler for how we can prevent waste during construction phase. And then of course energy efficiency for building services. Then how can space sharing happen? And space sharing is when you look at commercial real estate and see how buildings are empty, and what there are tremendous possibilities out here. But that's not too much that I want to talk about at this point of time. And useful life extension. Typically, buildings exist for about 50, 60 years, and you have to look at how you can, whatever you're doing, even the refurbishment cycle of whatever you're using within the buildings can be extended. Predictive maintenance, smart and predictive maintenance is coming, especially for commercial real estate. And then when you are going into redevelopment, so one may not just look at, so suppose you're a developer, and from a developer viewpoint, you'll not look at end of life at this point of time. But what if you are to do redevelopment and the developer ends up with managing the demolition waste? So what do you do with that? And what are the mechanisms or policies available that can enable circular economy? So while this is good on paper, how do you enable them, right? Okay, so there is a need for action. There is, the amount of resources that we extract, and there is a low material productivity compared to the global average. So the projections for future demand till 2050 is, you can see it on the right, and there is a much lower recycling rate in India as compared to developed countries. And we are the third highest CO2 emitter, responsible for 6.9% of the global CO2 emissions. And a lot of the materials are actually responsible for 30% of land going degradation. So how do you look at ensuring that it doesn't go to the landfill? It is not going to rivers or our agri land and so on. So a lot of degradation of land is linked to how efficiently we are able to use it, and at the end of the use, what do we do with it, right? So, so a lot of critical raw materials, there is a high import dependency. So there is a need for urgent action on how do we utilize what we have in much more efficient manner, right? When it comes to C&D waste, India recovers only 1% of its C&D waste, right? Now, we do have a C&D regulation where every municipal corporation is supposed to ensure that in the context of that municipality, all the C&D waste has to be recycled. But the recycling capacity is only 1.3% of the total C&D waste generated. This is a wake-up call, and this is the thing on the ground that needs to be deployed. 13 cities till date have recycling facilities. More have been planned, but commissioning takes a lot of time. Many developers, small-time developers, don't even know where it has to be sent, and typically waste is sent off to landowners who say, okay, we are going to use it. But what do you use it for? You'd probably use it for degrading land, and there's no traceability to this. So there is a need for traceability and a strict policy around how C&D waste is tracked and traced to the end, so that we don't end up with land degradation, further land degradation, and we are able to realize value from this. Every municipality is expected to quantify and characterize the C&D waste. This work, I haven't seen specific reports around this, but this is something that needs urgent work. Okay, so the construction and demolition waste management rules, this policy has 3 applications of materials from C&D. One is that in landfills, you can use it as a drainage layer. Fines can be used for covering the landfill and also for curbstones, drain covers, policy blocks, and pedestrian areas. Now, why only in context of C&D waste usage? Why not, transfer this whole thing for city development? That a city development or township development, that a builder has to do these, and this has to be part of the policy. It has to be monitored, and then how do we do this is like standards have to be there, the certain quality standards associated with drain covers, paver blocks, the strength associated with it, and so on and so forth. So standards around the quality aspect of the reuse of the materials that come in. The National Resource Efficiency Policy of MOEF, we're looking at inventorizing of demolition waste by 2022. And the recycling rate by 2030 to reach 75%. And in public procurement, recycled material has to be used 30% by 2025. But to extend this further, could this not come into whoever is building residential, whoever is building commercial, whoever is building? So the built environment that India needs is, it's growing rapidly. And if you don't inject the right policy and the standards, because standards in the sense that, okay, materials and what materials I'm going to use, what is the correct recycled content, what kind of, quality of these materials that are going to come up, has to be defined very, very clearly. So I just wanted to bring to your attention. So what next, in the sense that it's very heartening to see what's happening with a company called CDE. They are into construction and demolition waste manufacturing of the equipment of the entire what do you call they're primarily equipment manufacturer for C&D waste management. And Dr. Sand is an outcome of that in the sense that it is engineered sand with aggregates and sand of various qualities, various standards that can go into RCC. So if this loop is completely closed through the policy interventions, through the collaborations, currently it's happening only through the private sector collaborations. If it can be strengthened further in form of the cost effectiveness of these materials to be made available, and the encouragement of developers who are going to be using all of this as alternate materials in the products, could go a long way in closing the loop, especially when it comes to C&D waste. There are alternate materials. There are providers like MyMalba. MyMalba is on-call service for construction waste. This is a very, very unique concept, which is also tracking this is a very, very small startup. It's also tracking illegally dumped C&D waste, so that you can actually call them and figure out, okay, put it on a map, and it's there on the Google map saying that this is where these are illegal pockets, these are legal pockets, this is where you can find the construction waste. And tying it to Dr. Sand, because Dr. Sand and Malpa have tied up together. So just some unique ideas out here to look at the implementation side of things that are already happening on the ground, with or without policy interventions, with or without standards. There are challenges if there are no standards. I'll tell you how. Because, for example, when it comes to a product like this is a straw, leftover straw into building materials. Now, the testing of these materials need to happen. Testing for a variety of parameters, strength parameters, and the normal parameters that you need, thermal comfort parameters, and so on. That is where standards come into the play. That is where encouragement on policy for use of these materials come into the play, so that whatever we are saying in terms of standard setting can be actually deployed on the ground. There's another company called Green Jams, which looks at carbon negative material from crop residue and so on. So coming to the conclusion, so there are various aspects of circular economy, like I explained in my first slide. But the key ones to tackle is that how do we increase the uptake of upcycled materials, and ensuring the regulatory policy implementation and monitoring for proper disposal of C&D waste would go a long way. And then upcycling the same back into the sector, because we are willing to procure it back, provided it passes the quality standards that are required for the buildings. And then primarily on the redevelopment, what kind of guidelines are to be standards are required, or a policy is required on demolition and handling the demolition waste. So I'll conclude over here. If there are questions, happy to answer, but just wanted to give a more real, on-site kind of a view to the entire problem of circular economy that we are discussing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sunita. It's really very informative and very valuable case study talking about the construction sector. Definitely, we do have challenges, but I really liked the last slide of the vendor ecosystem. While the startups does exist, but then are they really developing or doing activities based on standards, processes, or a standard mechanism? It's missing. And I think it's a very big gap area where a lot of work can be done. I heard from Professor Sharma initially that in the construction and waste, we do have standards, but probably these standards need to be evolved to support this startup ecosystem so that they can develop something. And there is a standard product or services or processes built into those innovative solutions. And I'm very happy to hear that MyMalwa and Dr. Sands and Green Jam, these are good initiatives, but then to have the confidence that what they're doing is really, they're building upon the standards is the need of the hour. And I think work could be done at BIS.
So if I can add, sorry, but basically they need support. They are not aware, they are innovators, but they don't understand that a developer will not take up the solution if it doesn't meet the standard for that particular. So for example, I want to do something, I want a brick. I know my brick has a particular structural strength or something. So it has to meet the quality standards, or the gating criteria has to be defined. And when innovators come in, if they don't follow the standards, many times they need a lot of hand-holding. They are young guys. They need a lot of hand-holding. They are not even SMEs, right? So they don't even have the initial funding. But yeah, so that's where standards come in, because without the standards, developer will not deploy it. For example, we were talking of SRI paint, and SRI paint research is still going on. It's surface reflective paints. And if the SRI paint doesn't meet the quality standards of a normal paint and the longevity of a normal paint, no developer will put a SRI paint. So could we get some kind of support for alternative materials? It will require policy intervention plus standard support. I think a lot of hand-holding is required.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've made a note of it, and I'm sure we can find out not only policy initiative, funding support, hand-holding, it's need to be built in. But thank you very much for your participation and the presence.
Thank you.
It's very valuable session, and we will make best use of it by working together between you and India and these different technical committees to address these topics. Paucity of time, let's move to our next panelist. We could have continued the discussions, but our next speaker is Ms. Pamela Arif, working in the capacity of Head of Global Engagement at an organization called ECOS, which is Environmental Coalition on Standards. Ms. Pam has recently taken up this role, but she brings with her a lot of knowledge and an experience. While she will be focusing around the cross-cutting activities at ECOS to further expand ECOS engagement in the standardization system at international, national, and regional level, while working with stakeholders covering standards makers, policy makers, standards industry, and importantly, the environmental NGOs. With a very illustrative career, she has earlier worked with National Standard Body Australia. She's also worked with the ISO Central Secretariat in Geneva as head of membership, and ITU as well. And she has an experience of British diplomat for over 20 years while serving in Africa, Americas, and Europe. Thanks for joining us, Ms. Pam. Request to your intervention, and may I request Reva to please present Pam's slide, please.
Thank you very much, Dinesh. And let me say, one of the benefits of speaking at this stage of the proceedings is that I've had the benefit of hearing from all the wonderful speakers, all the interventions and insights and wisdom. And I think what this is forming at least a picture in my mind of what Dr. Kumar mentioned at the outset of the webinar, that there really are many, many synergies between what's happening in Europe and what's happening in India. So I think thanks to you as the organizers, you and Riva and others, in bringing us together today, because I think what you're doing is triggering many opportunities that surely lie ahead for us to work together and to share insights in what we're doing and to see how we can actually work in future more productively. So turning please to my...
Just wait a second. Reva is raising her hand. Maybe Dr. Purushottam, you have to,
Yeah.
Reva.
I don't have the control yet.
No, but you can just take a control, share a screen and then take a control. That's it, as simple as that. But I request Dr. Purushottam to please close your presentation.
Oh, I think I can't.
Just wait, she's taking over. Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now I think
that's fine.
Now you can do it. Go ahead, Pam. Sorry for your intervention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dinesh. Lovely, thank you, Riva. So, I mean, what I thought I'll do today is try to set out for listeners on the call, on the webinar, a little bit of an introduction to ECOS, what kind of organization we are, an overview of the areas of work that we're involved in. But also I want to extend a hand to those participating in the webinar to keep in touch, and let's talk beyond this event. Let's see where the opportunities lie for us to actually do some collaboration in the future. So I'm going to rush through this. I'm conscious of the time, Dinesh, so this will be breakneck speed introduction to ECOS and our work. So hold on to your hats, everybody. So please bring up the first slide, Reva. There we are. I'm going to just quickly tell you about ECOS. So we're an international non-governmental organization. We've been around for about 20 years. And what we do is represent and push for an increased voice on the environment in the development of standards and by extension legislation and policy, be that national, European, regional, international level. So we're recognized in Europe as the organization for environmental interests in European standardization activities, and that's often referred to as an Annex 3 organization under the European regulation. We are membership-based. Currently, our members come mostly from Europe. We also have North America, but we're a growing organization, so we are looking to expand our membership. And this is where I would like to extend a hand to potential organizations in India that may be interested in what we do. We also collaborate globally with credible and reliable experts in technical standards development and policy, and we draw on their areas of expertise to bring that quality and insight into the development of specific standards. And we take part in standards development as a liaison organization. We're involved in 32 ISO technical committees and 16 IEC technical committees. We also take part in the technical management board of ISO that focuses on climate change coordination. Our members, the members of ECOS, can also participate in standardization through national level, through their national standards bodies. So for example, if we had members in India, they would take part in standardization through BIS. And back at the center, we're also focused on the work that we do in Europe with CEN and CENELEC, and we're formal partners to CEN and CENELEC, and we are members of ETSI. So we're very active in the development of standards. So moving on, Reva, to the next slide, let me just describe a little bit about our mission. So we want to see high quality standards that can benefit the environment, benefit society, and of course business. We want to enhance that environmental voice in standards development at all levels, be that national, regional, or international. And we also want to see standards enable the SDGs and environmentally friendly technologies. And perhaps just expand on some of the work we've done there, we recognize that standards provide that shared language and tools that can translate principles into action. So if the environment is ignored in their development, then of course it can mean negative consequences for people, for the planet. So just as an example of SDG 12, the sustainable production and consumption goal, we look to have robust definitions for common bottles and containers because that underpins their reusability. We also, for example, look at cooling appliances, such as air conditioners and fridges that we all have in our homes, and the use of greenhouse gases in those appliances. So having the right standards can help reduce the pollution by introducing more natural alternatives that will still allow us to have those appliances, but in a much more environmentally friendly way. And that, of course, links to the SDG 13 and climate action. So moving, Riva, to the next slide. I know that this is a subject that's been emphasized today, and I think Ashok this morning was pointing out the importance of standards in public policy. This is just a little image really to show where that works, where the interaction is. And as we have heard from many of the speakers today, especially from ministries, they are setting out the overall objectives through their policies. But then what comes next is beneath the policy, we see that the laws and regulations will define the essential requirements. But those essential requirements really just indicate what, and they don't go as far as specifying how. And this is the beauty of the standards. This is where they come in. They set out the technical requirements and specifications that will be needed to meet those regulatory requirements and therefore deliver on the policy objectives. And we see standards as playing a really important role in supporting environmental policy and protection. They influence the industry competitiveness. They help foster innovation, as we heard earlier from our friends from Mr. Bali, I think it was from Volvo, and also Mr. Carlson from Sweden, were talking about standards and innovation. We see that standards can influence environmental performance and energy savings. That's an enormous benefit, again, in the delivery of public policy. They influence consumer decision-making. So for example, through labeling and claims, consumers can make more informed decisions. And then of course, when it comes to measurements, they provide that common understanding of comparability, verifiability, and reliability. So in that sense, there's a real contribution that standards can make in support of environmental legislation. So moving please, Reva, to the next slide. This is simply a quick overview. I won't dwell on the details of the kinds of areas of work that ECOS is involved in. We're kind of a unique organization in that we focus specifically on the standards around key sectors. So decarbonizing is one major area of our work, major pillar, so sustainable buildings, clean energy, and so on. And then we are looking at the circularity of products, and that you see a whole list in the middle of the slide there of the areas where we are developing standards. And on the far side, you'll see that we're also looking at the tools that are needed to support this kind of work. So how do we define and measure circularity? And how do we measure climate performance? So this is another really important area for our work. So moving on, Reva, to the next slide, and I'm conscious of time. Let me quickly just introduce in a little bit more detail some specifics of the work that we're doing. Circular economy, we've heard a great deal this afternoon from many of the speakers. We've heard about TC 323. We know there's work happening at the level of SEN and SENELEC. We've heard about work that's happening at the level of IEC. And I think this is a nice image to just focus on where some of the need for further work is concentrated on circular economy. There's still debate to be had, and there's still consensus to be reached. One of the previous speakers highlighted the need for consensus. I think it was Vimal was talking about the importance of consensus, and that's absolutely true. And there are so many aspects to that slide, to the details of that slide, that clearly we're not yet there. So there's questions about even where does the circular economy start and end? So these are questions that still need discussion at the level of standardization. We find concepts such as refuse and rethink. These relate to concepts of sufficiency. So what do we need and what can we afford? So again, these are areas that are not yet clarified. Further debate is needed. And then at the bottom end of that little hierarchy, you can see concepts such as recycling. Again, different countries have different understandings of recycling, and whether that includes, for example, waste incineration, or other countries to consider that to be outside of the circular economy. So again, more work to do, no consensus there, and definitely another speaker spoke about stakeholder engagement and the importance of bringing people to the table. And that's certainly going to be true going forward. So a quick jump to the next slide, please, Reva. And I'm nearly at the end of my presentation. This is just to highlight some standards work that went on in Europe, EN 45555X series, comparing circular features across brands. Many advantages to these standards, particularly as a tool to understand design and service provisions that help extend product life or support the systematic inclusion of recycled materials in products. The details will be shared with you, I'm sure, after the session, and you can take a closer look at those standards. And moving on, I think, to my penultimate slide, please, Reva. Thank you. Again, just to highlight another area of the work that we're doing. This is around circular electronics, e-waste. We've heard others talk about that subject today. some staggering numbers such as 83 elements in the periodic table, and more than 60 are used to produce electronic equipments that end up in our waste fill. And these, of course, have become very, very dangerous to human health and the environment: mercury, lead, cadmium, and so on. And so what needs to happen here, of course, is greater investment in the standards development activities. We need strong circular design rules, more robust standards to deal with these challenges. And some of this work is already happening at the level of Europe, and I'm sure there would be interest in India to understand the details of those activities. So there we are. That was, I fear, a very quick explanation of ECOS as an organization. It's a very interesting and unique model. That's just some overview, a very quick overview of some of the work we're involved in. And as I said at the outset, I hope that we'll be able to keep in touch with the participants on the call today so that we can see where there are opportunities to continue this discussion and really make a change. Thank you, Dinesh.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you very much for sharing the excellent work ECOS is doing and the sectors and the areas which they're touching upon. I can say while working on this topic in India, these are similar topics even in India we are working on, be it e-waste, be it eco-design. You heard from other panelists talking about construction waste. So I think the areas which you're covering around circular economy, it's wide, but even India has a similar topics which they are focusing on. So we will take your help, we will seek your help, because we plan to have follow-up webinars. And plus, I'm sure the Indian attendees who are participating in this webinar now post-webinar will contact you. And we, as Mr. Vimal said, consensus need to be built. And you highlighted many areas where consensus still need to be built. And at the end of it, it's a global world, it's a global economy. So we need to work together on this. Thank you very much. We look forward to continue working with you. And thank you very much for your participation. Let's move on. I know we are running late, but it's important. We are last session, but let's continue. We have two more panelists. Our next panelist is Mr. Matthias. Mr. Matthias Gomel. He's a head of technical regulation and standardization, Asia Pacific at Siemens, Germany. While working at Siemens, Mr. Matthias lead the areas of technical regulation and standardization in Asia Pacific, Americas, provide his expertise to cooperate partners to ensure technical product conformity and further streaming of the quality infrastructure. University of Stuttgart, Germany, and gained specialization in factory operation and strength of material from George Washington University, Washington, DC, USA. Today, Mr. Matthias is going to share with us what's the role and contribution of international standardization in improving or addressing the sustainability. So the floor is yours, sir, and thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dinesh, and thank you very much to the honorable panelists and participants to have me here to contribute with a few examples from smart electrification, automation, and digitalization for sustainability. So we've heard from Sri Satyendra Kumar that he mentioned the Honorable Prime Minister Modi's Indian actions on circular economy. The same way we have our Green Deal, both setting the highest priority principles for climate and environmental goals that we want to achieve. Similarly, Siemens has defined its degree framework that sets clear priorities for the future and for the past. In the past, we have already achieved over the last years our CO2 emissions by more than 50% via energy efficient buildings, factories, green electricity, decentralized energy systems, new mobility concepts and e-cars, and already achieved more than 70% of the electricity consumption of our sites globally covered by renewables. And similarly, we have also for the future ambitious targets like Sri Kamal Bali mentioned from Volvo, similar and the same in line for zero emissions and landfill. Now, how did we achieve this? How do we want to achieve it and work on this in the future? We have our company core technologies, and Sri Choudhury mentioned, well, data is everything. He mentioned security of data. Let's take a few examples: simulation, digital twin, data analytics, connectivity, and edge. All this is key part of digitalization that help us to achieve our sustainable goals. How? I want to show then later on in a few examples. Well, this means we leverage our company core technology in all our business of smart electrification, automation, digitalization for sustainability. I guess the portfolio and the focus areas are clear, but what is the relation to standards? Well, of course, all of these are somehow related to some standards. And I'm sure that the few minutes and this page is not big enough to mention all of them. I've heard many others. Just example, the 323 has been mentioned a few times, and Johannes Auer, one of our colleagues from digital industry, is also participating. And with this, Professor Sharma has now number 3 of the members participating in ISO TC 323. But the point is that all of those committees and with the related standards contribute or shall and will contribute definitely to achieve the sustainable goals. Just a few examples. Let's take the industry automation, IEC TC 65. Here you see a set of standards which are already defined for smart manufacturing. They are clustered. They can be clustered in a reference architecture model, RAMI, which is the name. And of course, with this, I want to take out then 2 examples to close the show this. The message, as already has been mentioned, and I just share the hands with Vimal, is consensus and get engaged. We have a well-defined system of international ISO IEC standards, and let's use it and continuously complement and develop it to improve sustainability. Now, 2 examples. With this, I need to go back to our European Green Deal. That is known. We have continuously new regulations supporting the principles. And let's look at 2 specific initiatives, the Sustainable Products Initiative and the measurement of product at product levels. Out of these, I want to focus my 2 examples on these, on these green marked parts, which is then a tool to track the product properties, like, for example, concerning durability, reusability, upgradability, repairability, as well to track the carbon footprint. And with this, I come to the digital product passport. What is this and what does it consist of? Well, it all starts with the product label, the product nameplate. Of course, I guess you've heard about it. That's a little plate that are on all the products. And now we work in a digital nameplate. The digital nameplate is handled in the standard 63365. That's a committee draft for vote just now in the last weeks reached that status. So we all can contribute to the further development of the digital nameplate. We also have other standards, of course, like the 62474, which is for material declaration, in this case for the electronic and electronic industry. We also have information about carbon footprint, which I will focus on then the second example. So how do we bring this together? We merge this information, and with the digital nameplate and the additional product information, we will have the European Digital Product Passport. And as Dr. Ms. Brava Singh mentioned, we have to focus on the product lifecycle thinking. And that's what we can do with these technical small tools like a digital nameplate, collecting information over the whole product lifecycle, and then have let's say parameters and a tool to improve those product characteristics. So what is the contents of such a digital nameplate? Well, this is currently in definition. It can be information about a company, manufacturing locations, technical specifications, certificates, patents. Product information can include legislation standards that the product complies with, information on safe use and instructions, information on testing, disassembly, maintenance, repair, information on product environmental, carbon footprint, information on sustainability levels, such as the EU Eco-label. So this is currently in definition, and I just can, let's say, shake hands again with Vimal to say, get engaged. Currently, this is defined in the IEC committee or in the IEC standard 63365. Get engaged, or we can also continue one of our future workshops. So next example. So this example again means that with the digital nameplate, we contribute to reduce tons of paper documentation and also the resources. The next example focuses on the carbon footprint of control cabinet. And here I want to point out the contribution of the tool of the asset administration shell, which is defined in the IEC 63278 standard. maybe not all of you are familiar with the asset administration shell, but that contains the product description, which is then again part of the digital nameplate or of the European product passport. So let's start with a very small part, which is a screw. This little metal screw, which you see here on the left corner, and this little screw has a carbon footprint. This carbon footprint goes back to the mining operator, to the steel maker, to the screw maker. All of them have their little carbon footprint due to the production they use, the logistics, the material, the energy, the recycling material. And this little technical parameter is included in that little blue box, which you see here on top of the screw. That's a symbol that we use for the asset administration shell, which contains the product characteristics. So what happens next? Maybe you imagine this will be part and put together with many, many more parts to the next component. The next component maybe take a terminal block. So this terminal block also has to calculate and also has a carbon footprint for the same parameters: production, logistics, material, energy, or recycling material. So you see the little asset administration shell also already has more information. Now you can imagine what happens next. Well, also this little terminal block is part of a bigger component together with many more components. We can build it in a programmable logic controller. And again, what happens next? Also this is part together with many, many other parts and forms a control cabinet. That's a control cabinet that we need for electrification of our electrical systems, be in industry, be in public networks. So the point is that along the supply chain, along this product life cycle, we have a lot of information concerning the carbon footprint. And this little technical tool, let's call it this asset administration shell, helps to collect this information and then to target it to improve the traceability, as Raoul Charlson said, the traceability, and at the end to optimize the use of the resources. So, but that's not all. What's next? So this information must be available. So with this, we currently work on a network, which is a database, which is called Estanium. And this Estanium network provides, as you see, the input from all the suppliers, from infrastructure providers, from smaller medium enterprises, from utility providers, from certifiers, to provide their carbon footprint contribution to the technical platform, which is the asset administration shell, and which is part of the digital nameplate or of the European passport, of the product passport. This information is linked via a specific communication platform to the Estanium ecosystem. Of course, no need to mention it's different methods of carbon capture or carbon footprint calculation are available already, and different databases will be connected or have to be connected. Conclusion. This means with this little tool, a very little technical tool, which is defined in the IEC 63278, in this case, it's the IEC TC65, this contributes to indicate, to collect, to assess, to improve the product parameters. One product parameter, as shown here, is the carbon footprint. But of course, this can be used for many, many product characteristics, like materials, like energy, whatever you want to think of. And with this, we can trace the parameters, we can trace the improvement of these parameters, and thus definitely contribute to optimum use of our resources. So again, final word, let's mutually further develop these standards and let's apply them in order to improve sustainability. Thank you, Dinesh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthias. Very valuable, very informative, and especially the two case studies which you brought it up on the digital product passport and the carbon footprints of a control cabinet, especially. I like the way it is structured and going into the Estanium platform where you can measure the carbon footprints. I'm sure India will learn a lot. And then you already highlighted various technical committee exist addressing those different aspects of circular economy. Collaboration and platform exist. People need to come forward and start working together at these global platforms so that we can have single standard, globally implemented, of course, with the comment of Dr. Sharma that it should have a modular structure. And I'm sure it will be addressed the way we are trying to address circular economy, resource efficiency on a common footprint. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for your intervention. And now we move to our, thank you, sir. Now we move to our last panelist of the session, Mr. Andrea Nem, who is a program manager at Sensenelec, working with the Energy and Living, which covers standardization and digital solutions at these European standards organizations, Senelec. She's responsible for steering standardization activities and facilitating the introduction of new work items in the areas of environment, climate, and energy sectors. She's also in charge of engaging with members, policymakers, and other stakeholders while talking about environmental awareness through webinars and training. She holds an MS degree in chemistry and an MBA in international environmental economics. Please, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dinesh, and good afternoon, everybody. It's not the best thing to be the last speaker. So many interesting and valuable things were said before you that it's not easy to say new things after all that. Anyway, I'll try to say something new. I will speak about European standardization here, and I will focus on how we coordinate at Sensenelec, the European standardization body's circular economy activities. And then I will bring some examples on how we support European policies. So next slide, please. Yeah, so basically at Sensenelec, we have a strategic advisory body on environment that's been active for years. And they established a subgroup, a so-called circular economy topic group in 2020. Why did that happen? Because it was realized that we had more and more need, which is related to the recent policy initiatives as well, but the demand from industry that are related to circular economy, and these are horizontal requests. And on top of that, we had to react better and faster as regards standardization. So to accelerate and to better respond to the market and policy needs, the group was established. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just a few words about the group itself. Here you can see the structure of the strategic advisory body. You can see it relates, the work relates to all sector fora within the Sensenelec, the coordination groups, also works closely with the European Commission and the technical committees. And it advises to the Sensenelec technical boards. So it has several topic groups and teams, and one of the topic groups is the SABE Circular Economy Topic Group. And what is their role? Their role is now to coordinate standardization activities in the field of circular economy within SEN and Senelec, but also to follow international standard development activities and European policy developments. They also have to take care of the following up of the strategic standardization issues, the discussions on that, to bring it in the discussion if there's a need at level of Sensenelec, but they don't develop standards. What they intend to do, to develop some guidance, support the technical committees, for instance. Next slide, please. Yes, it's just a brief overview of what kind of ad hoc groups, horizontal ad hoc groups were created so far by this group. So the first one was the tracking and analysis. Basically, they carried out a mapping, which I presented in the event of last January. I don't know of those who participated. So basically, they mapped the ongoing planned and missing blocking standardization activities within Senelec and possibly beyond. There are still gaps. They still have to complement these gaps. They are still working closely with the TCs to gather more information on the ongoing projects. The ad hoc group 2 developed a working plan, defined short, medium, long-term activities. The working plan is under approval. And they also carried out a survey among the TCs to see what is the awareness about circular economy. And they found that the awareness is really low. Often circular economy is not really known by the technical committees, or it's known, but they are not aware that they are carrying out standardization related to circular economy because it's not explicitly said. So the ad hoc group 3 is working on terminology. They are not developing terminology, but they are collecting all circular economy, material efficiency, and resource efficiency related terminology to share it with the technical committees and to help these technical committees to understand these definitions and to apply these definitions, not to invent new definitions. And the Atro Group 4 is focusing on mainstreaming circular economy and standard, and also to do some education, because as a follow-up of the survey which was carried out among the TCs, and the awareness is it was considered to be low, the group decided to do some education among the technical committees. And recently a new Atro group was also created on taxonomy. And basically the EU taxonomy regulation is a classification system adopted in 2020. Basically, it includes a list of environmental and sustainability activities, and it was established with the objective to direct European project investments towards sustainable projects. And one of the 6 environmental objectives of this taxonomy is the transition to circular economy. So this is why the group decided also to focus on that. Next slide, please. So the group became very big. So even since last year grew, and it's constantly growing. It has already 120 members representing 30 CEN and 9 CENELEC committees, 19 national standard bodies, and 10 liaisons. And it's still not complete. There's still sectors they want to cover and reach out for. So one of the activities, as I mentioned before, that's awareness raising and engaging is basically the workshops. They decided to do 2 biannual workshops. So the very first one, it will be held on the 25th of February this year. And there are already 3 TCs volunteered to share their experience. And apparently after the publication of the invitation, the mailbox almost exploded because there was so much interest in participating in the event. Next slide, please. My next slide will be basically about, I present here the latest EU policy initiatives related to circular economy, really the very latest ones from end of 2021 and the upcoming one from 2022. For instance, in November 2021, the European Commission adopted a proposal for new rules on waste treatment. And there are planned adoption for several initiatives under this action plan, which was already mentioned before by the Commission. So, for instance, legislative proposal for substantiating green claims made by companies, legislative proposal empowering consumers in the green transition, EU strategy on sustainable textiles, sustainable product policy initiative, including the revision of the eco-design directive, to review the requirements of the packaging and packaging waste in the EU, and also update of the EU rules on industrial emissions. So I thought I will just give you a few examples on how we support with these standards. What we do actually, we always check to what extent we already have standards that can support these emerging policies or new policies. And then we engage in discussion with the policymakers to see what new standards they need, what can we bring them to support policy implementation. Next slide, please. Next, yes. This is my first example, basically on waste recycling. So, as I mentioned before in my earlier slide, the countries that receive waste from the EU, they are only able to receive if they are able to ensure that they can manage the waste sustainably. So an example of how the EU thinks that the waste is managed sustainably is how we do in the EU, basically. We have a directive on waste electrical and electronic equipment, which sets requirements and targets for the collection and treatment of WEEE. This is publicly available, readable, downloadable from the website. And this directive is basically obliges producers and importers to report on the amount of WEEE which was put on the market, and the treatment operators on the amount of WEEE treated. So with this information, with the reported amounts provided, it can be they can get information authorities on how targets are met. And standards are supporting these are very general descriptions, And the standards provide the details, as Pamela said just before me. So basically, the standards assist treatment operators in fulfilling the requirements of this directive. They provide additional guidance. They also cover the treatment of waste from all product categories with the extended scope of the VE directive. And they cover also the collection and transport of the VE to allow proper treatment. As you all know, you can have only proper treatment if you have the right collection and the transport in place. And last but not least, it also covers preparation for reuse. Next slide, please. In my next slide, I will just present a brief overview. Next slide. Yeah, yeah, next one. Yeah, next, please. Yes, here it's just an overview of the VE standards here. I have no time to go in any details. You can see that we have one series on collection logistics. Oops, the one before. The one slide before, please.
Yeah, there is some delay at Reva PC.
Okay. Anyway, okay, here. So yeah, we have so we have standard series on collection, logistics, and treatment requirements for end-of-life household appliances, particularly the ones containing volatile fluorocarbons and volatile hydrocarbons. We have one series for treatment requirements. As I said, the VE directive is general, and these standards provide the details, the technical details. We have specific treatment requirements for various products like lamps and heat exchange equipment and so on, basically covering everything. And we also have a standard, as I said, requirements for preparing for reuse. And we have also a brochure. I put a hyperlink there below. If somebody wants to better understand on how we apply these standards, this series of standards, this is a very clear explanation on how this is done in this brochure. Next slide, please. Yeah, now just from the waste, let's move back from the design. As you heard, there will be amendment of the Eco Design Directive, and we produce a lot of standards in support of this directive. So basically, as regards eco design and labeling, we are developing plenty of standards. What is eco design? Basically, eco design removes from the market the least energy and resource efficient product by legislation, and the energy labeling enables consumers to make a better choice by knowing what is the energy consumption of the product. This way they can choose a more efficient product. We have dedicated coordination group who's coordinating this work since 2012. And we have 25 technical committees who are involved, or product technical committees developing the respective standards. And we already have produced more than 180 standards, and there are still 50 under development. And the eco design working plan, it always sets us on what is expected and what kind of standards will be developed. You can see on the bottom with small letters how many standards for some examples of standards we developed for products. I don't want to read it up, it's super long, but I encourage you to have a look at my presentation after the event. Next slide, please. And yes, material efficiency, resource efficiency has been also mentioned many times, and it became lately a priority. So we have now eco-design requirements on material efficiency aspects for energy-related products. For the time being, only for energy-related products, but the EU is planning to broaden the legislation and go beyond energy-related products. Sense and Alike were requested to develop standards in support of that, to develop general standards that are basically covering material efficiency aspects like extending product lifetime, ability to reuse components or recycle materials from products at the end of life, and also to use the reuse components and recycle materials in products. We have a dedicated technical committee, Sense and Alike Joint TC10, that developed these generic principles. And these principles, and I will show you my next slide, can be used by the specific product technical committees when they are developing the product specific standards. Next slide. My next slide, you can see an overview of these standards. which was created based following a standardization request from the Commission. So you see we have a standard for definitions, durability, ability to remanufacture, repair, upgrade, recycle, recover, promotion of reused components, proportion of recycled material content, declare the use of critical raw materials, and information related to material efficiency. Next slide, please. Yeah, and last before the conclusion, an example for, I could have brought much more examples, but I had to really limit myself. So packaging, which we heard already before, it's very important also for India. So also it's important in Europe to reduce packaging waste and also to make packaging waste more easy to recycle. We have a dedicated technical committee who is working on the environmental aspects of packaging, more specifically on the degradability and organic recovery, material recovery, reuse, recycling, and management of dangerous substances. This committee has developed a series of standards in support of a specific European directive on packaging waste. And currently, they are focusing on the plastics, which is also a highlight here in Europe. And they developed a draft standard already in support of the EU initiative published in 2019 on single-use plastics to avoid the single-use plastics waste spreading in the environment. And the standard is about test methods and requirements to demonstrate that plastic caps and lids of single-use beverage containers remain attached. And this group is also participating and contributing to the Circular Plastic Alliance, which is an EU initiative. And it has the objective to recycle plastics, basically reach the use of 10 million tons of recycled plastic by 2025 in the EU market. And they are over 300 organizations that signed this commitment to reach this objective of the recycled plastic use. Yes, and in the context of that, we are waiting for a new standardization request, but I don't want to go in more detail on that. Next slide, please. It's just a conclusion. Basically, so circular economy, you know, and you heard it's very broad, covers basically the whole economy, and we develop standards for almost all of the circular economy areas. So it's impossible to give example in a presentation for all. But the main conclusions we had, and I think in the whole meeting it was the same, that we need a closer cooperation among the sectors and a closer cooperation among the producers and recyclers and industries. And we also need a broader involvement of stakeholders like industry, SMEs, societal stakeholders to better identify what we need. And yes, I think that's it. Thanks very much for listening, and thank you for those who had the courage to stay so long.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And I know you, while I know that you become the last speaker of the session, we do get some benefit also. Because plenty of information covering up in such a short period of time is not possible. But as it was the first workshop of such nature and kind, we will continue this dialogue on sector-specific discussions. And I'm sure people have an interest on the topics which you have touched upon, whether it is material efficiency, whether single-use plastic, whether it's e-waste. All these topics are important. The way it is important for the world, the way it is important for EU, it is also important for India. Hence, these various operations and ongoing dialogue to build this consensus and build up these global standards, it's very important. I'm sure this dialogue will continue. We'll continue working with the Indian side. So thank you very much for your participation. Before I close the session, I would like to highlight one comment made by a colleague from ICTC 111, Christophe, that many of the SANELAC standards around e-waste have been incorporated as a baseline as part of this ICTC 111. So the work is ongoing. Please come forward and participate into this global ICTC 111. I'm a European standardization expert based out of India. I have been working with this project for the last many years. I'm present in India. So if you have any query about global standard, Indian standard, or European standards, I'm available. We do have, I think in the first session, Mr. Ashok highlighted that we do have a cooperation agreement with BIS. So we do have this topic included as part of that cooperation. So we'll continue that dialogue. We'll continue working on harmonization of these standards, because at the end of it, when there is one common standard, and there is one standard which is applicable all around the world or between the regions, it's always not to reinvent the wheel, bring the economies of scale and address the topic like this. Similarly, you have this EU REI project where Rachna and Reva highlighted. It's a resource efficiency project. So we are available in India locally. Please contact us, please come back to us, and we will be happy to work with you, to help you, to guide you, to share those information. With that, I sincerely thank all my panelists for taking out time, even if we got extended for half an hour or 30, 40 minutes. I think it was very valuable to have these discussions and the interventions. I request all the panelists of my session to please come back on the screen before we close it, so that we could take a final click of the picture. Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, Sharmaji. I think one more panelist is Dr. Purushottam. Are you there still?
I think Pamela has already left.
Pamela is there. Pam is there.
Pam is there.
Yes, he's there. Dr. Purushottam is also there. She's turning it on.
Great.
And was left out. So Dr. Purushottam was turning on the camera. I think he was turning it on. And Mr. Mahendru had to leave, so he's gone. So thank you very much. Just wait for a minute if Dr. Purushottam is coming. Yes, she's coming. Thank you very much, Dr. Purushottam. And thank you very much, colleagues. I give it back to Reva for a formal vote of thanks and a closer of this session. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be part of this session and moderating the session. Thank you very much for your valuable time. Thanks a lot. Have a nice evening, nice week ahead.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Stay
for a few
Thank
minutes.
you. Okay, I will take just 1 or 2 more minutes to give my vote of thanks. So on behalf of the EU Resource Efficiency Initiative, EU Delegation, CESAI projects, and CENELAC, BIS, NITI Aayogi, Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, and all the panelists who have been here. I want to thank all of you for staying on for this very interesting discussion. It has given us a lot of food for thought. Thank you to all the attendees who have been here. We will also have a short survey form. I'm not sure how many of you will be there to fill it. However, we really would appreciate if you do. We want to say that given that this discussion has already invited so much interest, we will also take forward the dialogue on standards and policy on resource efficiency and circular economy with the same group. So CESAI and CENELAC and EU REI will continue to work together and continue to hold these dialogues. So I encourage all the panelists as well as the delegates who are still here to reach out to us so that we can also go deeper into different kind of sectoral dialogues, into different issues, thematic areas, if possible. And EU REI will take forward the larger discussion on resource efficiency and circular economy across sectors and at an overall policy level, along with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and NITI Aayog. I still see Mr. Roy Chaudhary, Mr. Kumar, Dr. Bukki, still here with us since the very beginning of the webinar, and I extend a warm thanks to all of them. And I want to thank the entire team that supported us in organizing this webinar, especially the team of CENELAC, which helped us with hosting the webinar, reaching out to all the panelists, and organizing all the registration for us and managing a lot of technical things at back end. Of course, the CESAI team, the EU REI team, and all the experts who have joined us from the industry, experts who have joined us from civil society and have given their valuable inputs. I will say again that we will continue this conversation. There's a lot of food for thought. We have talked about enabling frameworks. We have talked about how we need to harmonize and also to continue to engage all the stakeholders and build consensus around these standards. And we also have reached a consensus that we have a lot to learn from each other. So in that spirit, we will take forward the future dialogues. I thank you all again. for joining us today. Please do fill the survey form, and thank you again. Have a good evening and have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.